Chapter 371. Todoro's shout was very loud and the surrounding people heard it clearly. Shea's face fell and he turned his head to glare at the magician. Adeline, on the other hand, didn't recognize the wretched guy who had thrown himself in front of her at first. After carefully looking at him, she recognized that he was the unlucky magician. The word "madam" made the long-legged girl's heart burst with joy. She only felt that this wretched guy was also somewhat pleasing to the eye. She couldn't help but cast a resentful glance at Shea, but she didn't expect that this country bumpkin had hurriedly turned his head away. She faintly sighed. The next thing to do was to enter the city. It was clear that Shea, the commander of the army, had disappeared for many days. It had a considerable impact on the morale of the army and the people. Under Green's arrangement, Shea took the lead and everyone followed behind. They walked all the way from the city gate to the city's garrison. This was an opportunity for Shea to show off and send a message to the people of the city. Lao Tzu is back. Although Shea had not been in power for a long time, he did not have any good governance to show. When it came to the people's hearts, he did not have much. But there was one thing. He was a local official and the head of a county. Speaking of which, although Green was a veteran in the army, he was still an official and was only at the level of a battalion. In addition, although Shea did not have any good governance, when he was recovering Metacity, Shea presided over a memorial ceremony for the former county governor, Lord Corinthia, who died for the country. After this action spread out, it was very popular among the people of Moore County. Everyone only felt that this Lord Shea's ability was not seen, but at least it seemed that he was a kind person. Gradually, Shea had become the backbone of the whole city. After all, the empire had been established for thousands of years. This idea of being an official had been rooted in the people's hearts. No matter what, this country bumpkin was still an official county governor. Therefore, as he swaggered through the streets, many commoners saw the return of this lord who had disappeared for many days from afar, and they all revealed joyful and relieved smiles. There were even some who stood far away, bowing and taking off their hats to salute him. Unlike the ordinary civilians, they encountered some patrolling cavalry along the way. Seeing that Shea had returned, they let out a burst of enthusiastic cheers. These cavalrymen were reorganized from the original horse bandit. Most of them had followed Shea into Ilton County to sow discord between Odin's men and the Corsican military. They had lived in the open, fought together, killed people, set fires, seen blood, drank wine, and tasted meat. The relationship between men in the army was already very strong. Therefore, Shea had built up quite a reputation among the cavalrymen. Seeing Shea return, the cavalrymen cheered. The only inharmonious interlude was that among the cheers of the cavalrymen, there were occasional shouts of, "The son-in-law is back." Adeline, who was sitting in the carriage at the back, suddenly had an interesting expression on her face. The long-legged girl immediately glanced at Shea with a very vigilant gaze for a long time. Although this poor thing might not be very smart, women were more or less born shrewd when it came to such matters. The long-legged girl immediately showed some nervousness, as if she was protecting her food. Back at the garrison mansion, which had now been changed into the temporary county governor's mansion, Shea did not have time to rest. Under Green's signal, he immediately summoned all the generals and subordinates in the city for a meeting. In fact, there was nothing important. It was just that as the boss, he had disappeared for so many days and only returned now. He had to give his subordinates an explanation. Shea hurriedly settled Adeline and Daphne in the backyard of the mansion and let Todoro lead them in. They temporarily lived together with the bald man Kevin's widow, Yuria. After that, he sent people to guard the front yard and began the military meeting. Now, there were no civil officials in the temporary county governor's mansion. It was full of uncouth soldiers. As for Shea, the position of county governor was also temporary. After Corinthia died for the country, He temporarily took over as the county governor with the status of county governor, which was also in accordance with the empire's legal procedures. Everyone gathered together, and Shea casually asked about the situation of these days when he was away. Green reported back one by one. In fact, there wasn't much to it. It was nothing more than the maintenance of the army, and Green had already begun to let the refugees out of the city to return to the countryside to work as farmers. After all, there was a limited amount of food in the city. If they did not hurry up, there would likely be a famine in the second half of the year. However, due to the limited number of soldiers in the city, they could only temporarily arrange for the residents of the villages and towns around Denzel City to return to their villages to work. Additionally, there were also mounted soldiers patrolling the area. This made the task of the mounted soldiers heavier. Fortunately, Green, the crafty old man in the army, made use of this opportunity to break up the mounted soldiers and reorganize them. He also mixed in a number of new soldiers. As a result, most of the old mounted bandits were broken up. This gradually reduced the banditry aura of the mounted soldiers. The second matter was the military equipment. For the time being, there was no shortage of weapons, such as swords and armor. At any rate, Denzel City was a military town. Additionally, it was the headquarters of the war against Odin. Thus, there was still a lot of stock in the warehouse. However, Green had a suggestion. Crossbows do not seem to be enough. After all, crossbows were consumables. There were some in the warehouse. However, after going through several small-scale battles, a lot of crossbows had been used up. If a big battle were to happen, there might not be enough crossbows. Thankfully, Denzel City was a military town and there were craftsmen. However, it would take some time for them to produce crossbows. At present, our army has a total of 20,000 soldiers. However, the number of crossbows we have in reserve is only enough to support a small-scale battle. Although we have already arranged for craftsmen to produce crossbows, it would be best if we do not have a big battle before the arrival of autumn. Otherwise, our archers will only be able to use swords to fight the enemy. Green's tone was very steady. He paused for a moment before continuing. The third matter is regarding the reorganization of the army. What I mean to say is, since we are all gathered here, we should unite as one. When it comes to strength, if it is divided, then it will be scattered. When it is united, then it will be solid. At present, there are 3 military supply systems within the city. Thus, the coordination between them has become a problem. Daily drills, supplies and barracks need to be rearranged. After saying that, Green turned to look at Shea. Shea nodded his head. He immediately understood Green's dilemma. At present, there were a total of 20,000 soldiers within the city. Among them, the number that belonged to him was pitifully small. Originally, there were only a few hundred soldiers defending Denzel City. Later, Nene led her men to join him, giving him 2,000 mounted bandits. He had also recruited some from the refugees. Given the chaos of war, the youths among the refugees were quite enthusiastic about joining the army in order to defend their homeland from the enemy. Thus, he was able to replenish the number of soldiers he had. However, the number of foreign soldiers was much higher. The 6th Corps had been rushed over from Notts County by Hastings. There were over 8,000 of them left. The remaining soldiers of the 7th Corps had escaped from Manninger's butcher's knife from the south. There were about 4,000 of them. Speaking of which, 2/3 of the 20,000 soldiers under his command were not his men. Be it the 6th Corps or the 7th Corps, although they had come to join him in a hurry, they were still part of the Empire's official Central Corps. In fact, deep down, they did not think highly of a rural garrison army like him. Moreover, in terms of military position, Shea, as the county garrison officer, was only at the level of an emblem regiment. However, the 6th and 7th Corps that had come over had a large number of emblem regiment officers. If they were to listen to Shea's commands, they might not be convinced. However, the 6th Corps and the 7th Corps could be considered to be in Shea's territory. The entire army's food, drink, and logistical supplies were all supported by Shea. Thus, they could be considered to have bowed their heads to Shea. In the beginning, everyone was still polite. However, as time passed and both sides gradually regained their strength, some issues arose. The 6th and 7th Corps were part of the Empire's official Central Corps. The army originally had its own system of military supplies. Previously, Grimm did not rashly interfere too deeply in order not to arouse the disgust of both sides. All the military supplies were sent by the current chief of logistics, Ka Tua, under Shea's command to the two camps and handed over to their own quartermaster to handle. However, this created a problem. There were a total of 3 different systems of military supplies and logistics in the city. One of Shea's subordinates was Ka Tua, who had come out of the Rodria cavalry with Shea. He was the chief of logistics. The 6th and 7th Corps each had one. These days, Shea wasn't in the city, and after a long time, both sides started to have some ideas. When Shea was around, with his official position and status, both sides could still reluctantly listen to Shea's orders. However, once Shea was gone, Grimm was only a battalion-level officer. Any one of the two sides that stood out was an emblem group-level officer. As a result, both sides had a few disagreements regarding supplies. In Grimm's mind, the best equipment would naturally be given to his own cavalry. However, both sides would clamor for supplies. In the midst of the quarrel, the people from the 7th Corps even said some unpleasant word. They vaguely hinted that during wartime, where the Central Corps was stationed, they had the right to take over the local military and political authority for their own use. There was a faint threat in their words. Lao Tzu could take in any of you. After all, the people from the 6th Corps were Ruhr's old subordinate. They had some old friendship with Shea. Although they did not make much of a fuss, they vaguely placed themselves in a neutral position and did not help either side. After Shea returned, Grimm had already said a few words to Shea before the meeting. At this moment, he deliberately mentioned it vaguely and looked at Shea. Shea's heart immediately gave birth to some annoyance. Damn it! This bunch of people, they had no choice but to seek refuge from Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu gave them food and drinks. He raised them for a few months. Now that they were full, they wiped their mouths and straightened their backs with Lao Tzu? Shea was a country bumpkin who only took advantage of others and did not suffer losses. Playing this game with a country bumpkin? Not to mention a door, there was no window either. He glared fiercely. The few officers from the 7th Corps also felt that they were in the wrong. Moreover, this Sir Shea and their young general were good friends. They were embarrassed to say anything more and the atmosphere instantly became awkward. Shea's expression became very ugly. He turned his head and looked at the leader of the 6th Corps officers. This person was the flag-bearer of the 6th Corps, Gelunxier. When the 6th Corps came from Notts County, it was this guy who contacted Shea in the city. Shea looked at Gelunxier and said, "The supplies and logistics must be unified. What do you all think? Do you all have the same idea as the 7th Corps?" Gelunxier's face turned red. He also felt that it was not right for them to do this after eating and drinking for a few months. But they were also part of the Central Army. If word got out that the Central Army was absorbed by the garrison army, no one could afford to lose face. He gritted his teeth and said, "Shea, there are tens of thousands of people gathered in the city. We have not come to a conclusion. Now it seems that we have to make a decision. If Odin's men come, who will command these tens of thousands of people? Who will command the troops to move? Otherwise, these people will be in a mess and argue with each other. Before Odin's men come, we will be in a mess." At this point, Shea's mocking gaze shrouded Gelunxier's heart. He felt guilty and his face turned red. He could not continue. Shea muttered to himself for a moment. Looking at these guys, he exchanged glances with Green and said with a smile, All right, we were both busy with other things before. Since both sides have these worries, we might as well solve this matter today. He snorted. You all are part of the Central Army. Naturally, you look down on the garrison army. I am a rough person. I don't know how to beat around the bush. I only have one thing to say. In front of me, Shea, the Central Army's arrogance is best not to show. You all are part of the Central Army? Lao Tzu came from the Roadrear Cavalry. When the last sentence was said, the momentum of these guys suddenly weakened. That's right. Although they were all part of the Central Army, they came from the Central Army's trump card, Roadrear. The 6th and 7th Army are far inferior compared to Roadrear. As for deployment, I will be frank. I am the military officer of Moore County. I am temporarily the county governor. If this is any other place, during wartime, the Central Army has the authority to control the area. That is true. But here, it will not work. Shea stood there and coldly looked at these guys. His eyes were like lightning. Before Lao Tzu came to Moore County, His Majesty the Emperor had told me that he had entrusted Moore County to me. No one can take it away from me. When the Emperor was mentioned, everyone could only pinch their noses and remain silent. After all, back when Shea was in the imperial capital, Emperor Cantos made a few promises when he was drunk. Everyone knew that this young Shea was someone that His Majesty the Emperor valued and groomed. In terms of rank, we are all the same. But in terms of status, Lao Tzu still has the title of Baron of the Empire. Shea calmly said, The territory is mine. The army is mine. If you are willing to stay here, then we will get through this together. If you are not, I will open the door and send you off. If you are willing to leave, I will not ask you to stay. Xiao was actually so unyielding, and he did not even bother to hide his unyielding attitude, causing the leaders of the 7th Army to be stunned. Since he had said this much, then he had made his bottom line clear. There were only two choices: either stay here and obediently listen to Xiao's words, or get out of here. As for using force to seize power, to be honest, the people from the 7th Army could not bring themselves to do so. Moreover, they did not have the confidence to do so. The strongest force in the city was the 6th Army. They had more than 8,000 soldiers. Shea. Grenseal's face was red. If you want us to listen to your orders, I have no objections. When we were fighting in the Albacete Plains, you were also in command. But now it is different. There is no precedent for a local army to merge with the Central Army. It is also not in line with the system. If that is the case, I have an idea. After a pause, he hesitated and said, Medar City is still empty. Why don't we, the 6th Army, move to Medar City and help you guard the southern gate? If Manninger attacks from the south, we can help you resist for a while. When Shea heard this, he was so angry that his nose almost became crooked. Good. The 7th Army wants to rebel against Lao Tzu. The 6th Army is not that ruthless, but you want to divide Lao Tzu's territory? You want Lao Tzu to give Medar City to you? You eat my food and drink my water, and you want me to give you a city before you leave? How can there be such a good thing in the world? Help me guard the southern gate in case Manninger attacks? Nonsense. Manninger is badly battered from fighting with the Corsicans. How can he have the energy to care about this? You speak so beautifully, but you want to poach Lao Tzu's people? Motherf *Ker, it's really like the person leading the troops. Roar, that damned Fatso's people are all cunning. Shea's face was full of anger, and even Green's face suddenly darkened. But before the two of them could speak, they heard an angry voice outside the door, shouting, Nonsense! Jelunxier, is your head crushed by a car wheel? You eat and drink us for a few months, and you want to steal our territory? After that, the door was slammed open, and a tall and burly figure slammed in. He walked a few steps forward and grabbed Jelunxier's collar, lifting him up like a chicken. The person who came in was Miss Nene. Nene glared at Jelunxier, her face full of anger, but she sneered. "Huh? You want to pat your ass and leave now? Good. Don't even think about Metter City. You can leave, but you have to spit out everything you've eaten from us for the past few months. And you, Jelunxier, the clothes and armor you're wearing were all taken from our Denzel City's warehouse. Strip them all before you leave." After that, her big hand stretched out, and with 2 rips, Jelunxier's clothes were torn to shreds. Although Jelunxier was also a general in the army, he didn't have the ability to resist in front of Nene. His face suddenly turned red, and he desperately struggled a few times before quickly running to the side. If he didn't run, he would be stripped naked by this female monster in front of everyone. That would be called losing face. As soon as Nene came in, her fierce eyes glared around, and her hand consciously or unconsciously pressed on the hilt of the sword at her waist. Anyone who met her eyes, whether it was the generals of the 6th or 7th Corps, quickly avoided her gaze. Shea was a little puzzled. He didn't expect Nene to have such prestige in front of these fellows. Truth be told, this was not surprising. The forces of the 3 factions were all stationed in the small city of Denzel. With so many soldiers in the city, they would have enough to eat and drink on a daily basis. Since they were all soldiers, it was inevitable that there would be some scuffles. It was normal for soldiers to occasionally get into fights. However, among the 3 groups of people in the city, the group of horse bandit cavalry was the most united and the most valiant. Occasionally, when they fought, once they provoked these horse bandit cavalry, they would swarm up like a swarm of bees. When they fought, they would not show any mercy. Moreover, Miss Nene was a fierce general. When they fought, in the whole city, except for Shea, who could beat her? Speaking of which, there were so many generals of the 6th and 7th Corps in this room, and almost half of them had eaten Nene's fists before. Nene's eyes swept around, and when she saw that no one dared to look at her, she shouted, "You all have your own thoughts and only want to protect yourselves. Humph, you want to fight with us for this little bit of power? Let's not talk about conscience. In the past few months we have saved many people's lives. But since you've already done such a thing, it's useless to talk about conscience with you. Let me tell you, if you want to stand up for yourselves, you can fight for power. But don't forget your own identity. The Central Army? What a joke. You are the Central Army? How can you not be in your own camp? You said that the Central Army can control their own territory during war? That's right. There is such a rule. But I want to ask you, there is another rule in the military law. What is the punishment for losing your own territory? She glared at them fiercely, and her voice was filled with killing intent. The 6th Corps is stationed in Knotts County. The 7th Corps is in Silton County. You lost your own territory, and now you want to come here and control us? How dare you call yourselves the Central Army? He had already become a stray dog. You still dare to call yourselves the Central Army? See, losing your own territory, and waiting for the orders from above, what will be the punishment? I remember that the main force of the 7th Corps is gone. According to the rules of the Empire, if the main force is annihilated and the main force is annihilated, then this corps will most likely be disbanded. How dare you call yourselves the Central Army? In a few months your status will be worse than ours. Her words were ruthless enough, and did not leave any face for them. The people from the 6th and 7th Army in the house were all red in the face from her scolding, and could not say a word. But these words she could only curse internally, but Shea could not. If she cursed internally, it could be said that she was a subordinate and said in a fit of anger. Shea held back his laughter, and secretly gave Nene a thumbs up. Nene did not even look at Shea. Green coughed, and Shea immediately understood. He said with a straight face, "Nene, that's enough." Shea's face was stern. "We are all comrades in the Empire's army, how can you be so rude? All right, we are all anxious about national affairs. Why don't you shut up? Stand to the side." At this time, Green walked up with a smile and lightly said, "Things can always be discussed. Everyone doesn't need to be angry. The current situation is rotten. Everyone is sitting in the same boat. Some hurtful words don't need to be said. Let's leave it at that for today. Let's think about it and come up with something." After the commotion, everyone felt that they had lost face. They did not say anything else and left one after another. When only Shea, Nene, and Green were left in the room, Green looked at Shea and hurried out. Shea felt that Nene's face was not right and smiled. "Thank you for just now. If you did not come in and stir things up, I am afraid it would be difficult to get off the stage today." "Humph. You don't need to thank me. It was that man you brought back who told me to come in." "Humph, you are not a good person either." Nene stared fiercely at Shea, but suddenly stomped her foot, gritted her teeth and said, "Men are all liars." She turned around and ran out. Shea stood there, not knowing whether to laugh or to cry. At this time, Bobov Dax slowly walked in from outside the door. This guy had already changed into clean clothes, and his hair was wet. It was clear that he had even taken a shower. When he walked in, he saw Shea's expression and deliberately sighed. "To be honest, I feel that I am starting to admire you a little." "What?" Dax pointed at the door behind him and lowered his voice. "Your taste is really heavy, brother." Shea's face immediately turned red and he kicked Dax. Dax quickly dodged to the side, but he saw that Shea had already stood up and was looking at him. He sighed and said, "Thank you for just now. Nene said that you were the one who told her to come in and stir things up." Shea said this and smiled. "I knew it. Nene does not have such knowledge." Those words, and the time to stir things up, they were all well grasped. Someone must have taught her. He looked at Dax with a strange expression. "You just entered the city for a while, and you already know the situation here. That's rare." Dax curled his lips. "Fighting for power, this kind of thing is the same no matter where you are. However, it seems that you have quite a bit of trouble here." Seeing Dax's expression, Shea's heart suddenly moved, and he whispered, "You have a way?" Dax chuckled, and a trace of killing intent flashed in his eyes. "Anyway, the sky is high and the Emperor is far away. Here, the sky is big, but you are the biggest. What do those soldiers know? You gather those leaders, secretly arrange them, and then—" As he said this, he raised his hand and made a chopping motion, coldly saying, "Get rid of those leaders, and those who agree with you will be afraid and won't dare to say anything. Then you will disperse those troops and incorporate them." When Shea heard this, he was stunned for a moment, then he angrily said, "Damn it! I asked you with good intentions, and you actually deliberately came up with this kind of rotten idea to mess with Lao Tzu." He fiercely said, "You really think that Lao Tzu doesn't know anything? Killing a few people is easy. But these guys are still generals of the Empire. If I kill these guys and seize their military power, it will be a serious crime. To put it more seriously, it is no different from rebelling. Don't look at how my subordinates Green listen to me now. If I dare to rebel, the first one to fall out with me will be Green. If Lao Tzu really uses this kind of method to incorporate these troops, then I will have no place in Byzantium in the future." When Dax heard this, he chuckled. "Not bad, not bad. At least you have some brains. It seems like you are not a rash idiot after all. But you deliberately put on a rude appearance every day, pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger?" After laughing, Dax put away his smile and sternly said, "I was at the back just now and heard some things. Right now in the city, the 6th and 7th Corps are not willing to accept you. But the 6th Corps is still a bit better, while the 7th Corps is the fiercest. If you want to solve this problem, it won't be difficult. You just have to pull one of them to suppress the other. But I didn't think that you would have so little capital in your hands. You only have 3,000 soldiers, and you want to swallow more than 10,000 of them. Your appetite is a bit too big. Don't talk nonsense. Do you have a way or not?" Shea's face was gloomy. Dax spread out his hands. I have only been in the city for less than an hour, and you have so many subordinates who can't solve this problem. That Green is a veteran general of the Byzantine army, and he can't do anything. You ask me, what do you think I am? Do you think I am Cavalier? Besides, I am not your subordinate, and I don't take a single copper coin from you. If you want me to work hard for you, you should at least give me some benefits, right? Seeing that Shea's eyes were about to spit fire, Dax was afraid that this guy would raise his leg and kick him again, so he quickly took a step back. All right, I'm scared of you. I'll give you another idea for free. These guys previously came to you because they had nowhere else to go. But now they have probably been living in peace for too long, so they started to have their own ideas. If you want them to unite by your side again, it's very simple. As long as there is a threat from outside, these guys will be afraid and won't care about internal strife. Shea's eyes lit up. You mean, it's very simple. If Odin's people attack now, who would dare to come out? If there is a threat from outside, these guys will be cautious and fearful. Dax thought for a while and added, but this idea can only delay and can't solve this problem completely. If you want to solve it completely, I don't have any good ideas. Unless your official position is much higher than theirs. Then, it would be perfectly justifiable for you to swallow them up. Sigh, you are just a small governor at the emblem group level. You are still lacking a little lacking. Shea nodded, but a thought came to his mind. That guy Philip, he was sent out to handle that matter. I don't know how he is doing. Poor Shea still didn't know that Philip, whom he had sent out to handle an important matter, had been met by this Dax on the way and had been seriously injured. But Shea naturally didn't know about this. Dax didn't say anything himself, and even though Adeline knew about it, Shea had deliberately avoided Adeline along the way. The two of them didn't talk much, so they didn't have a chance to talk about it until now. When Miss Nei came out from Shea's place, her heart was bitter and full of anger and grievance, and she didn't know where to vent it. From the moment she left the courtyard, there was only one voice screaming in her heart. He brought back a woman. He actually brought back a woman. This bastard. This liar. He even said that he didn't mind my looks. He even said that he didn't care about a woman's looks. He was obviously lying. The woman he brought back, that woman, sigh, that woman is so beautiful. How can I compare to her in my current appearance? In her fury, the first thought in her mind was to rush to the backyard and chop that woman Shea had brought back with a knife. She had been a bandit for so many years, so she naturally had the aura of a bandit. It wasn't strange for her to have such thoughts. But she immediately knew that such thoughts in her anger were too absurd. But she was full of grievance and had no place to vent it. She suddenly looked down at the magic bracelet on her wrist. It was all because of this thing. It made her look so ugly. If she could be restored to her former appearance, then, running with grief and indignation all the way, Nei had just reached the entrance of the garrison residence when he suddenly saw a few guards blocking a person's path outside the entrance. The person at the gate was dressed in a spotless white robe. When she came closer, she could see that it was a woman. Her long hair was also white, just like her robe. The cloak was pulled down, revealing a face. The face was delicate and beautiful, and from the looks of it, she was only in her 20s or 30s. However, there seemed to be an indescribable and strange aura between her brows. It was as if she was a 1,000-year-old demon that had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Especially the smile at the corner of her mouth, which had a hint of ridicule. A few guards stopped in front of the woman, as if they were interrogating her. The woman stood at the gate with her hands tucked in the sleeves of her robe, with her hands behind her back. She looked calm and indifferent. I'm here to look for my son. Have that little bastard Shea come out to welcome me. Tell him that his foster mother is here to ask for alimony. As soon as she said that, the woman's gaze swept past the guards and fell on Nene, who was standing at the gate. Clearly, she had never seen this woman's face before. But when Nene's gaze swept past her, a strong sense of familiarity that was etched into her bones surged up. This terrifying gaze, for many years, she had dreamt of it countless nights. It was the owner of this gaze that had brought her nightmares for the past 10 years. It was her, Nene suddenly felt incomparable fear. Her legs went soft and she plopped down on the ground. Enveloped by that gaze, her whole body trembled. Her expression was as if she had seen a ghost. That woman was, of course, Merlin. She smiled gently, and without taking any steps, she had already walked past the guard who was still in a daze at the door. She stood in front of Nei. Eh? It's you, little girl. You're actually by my son's side? Sigh, over the years you've become more and more beautiful. After saying that, she bent down and stretched out 2 slender fingers to gently pinch Nene's cheeks. The guards at the side were collectively petrified. Nene, Miss Nene, was actually being molested? No. It should be said, in this world, there is actually someone who is willing to molest Miss Nene. Could it be that we are all blind? Garcia stood quietly in the great hall. He looked at the long dining table before him and suddenly smiled gently. He whispered, "Father has always liked to sit in this seat to eat. He likes to eat calf tendon meat the most. It has to be roasted until it's tender and tender. I remember when I was young, he used to carry me as we ate. He even told me to eat more meat so that I would have strength when I grew up." He seemed to be talking to himself, but after he finished speaking, a sigh came from the corner of the room. "Your Majesty." I am now His Majesty." The corners of Garcia's mouth twitched. He turned around and looked at the figure in the corner. "Since I have inherited everything from Father, the throne, the responsibility of the family, then, do I also inherit you?" The figure in the corner said coldly, "I am naturally loyal to His Majesty." Garcia was silent for a moment. Then, he abruptly said, "Roar hates me." Then, he smiled, but it was a very sad smile. "He hates me. He sacrificed his Roadrear cavalry, the Empire's trump-card army. Actually, the Roadrear cavalry did not have to die." He turned his head and stared at the figure in the corner. "Father could have sent you out of the city to bring me in. Given your ability as a strong person, if you brought me into the city alone, thousands of soldiers and horses would not be able to stop you." The figure in the corner was silent. Garcia then rubbed his forehead and whispered, "Father did not do that. I understand his intentions. The Roadrear cavalry must die. The 13th Corps cannot continue to exist. This army must be sacrificed. Blood must be spilled. Only when all of them die can Father feel at ease." He whispered, "Father promoted Salambanili in order to balance out Adric's faction in the future. However, Adric's strongest force is the Roadrear cavalry. He had led the Roadrear cavalry for a total of 9 years. Pausing, the new emperor continued in a low voice. "I understand Father's original plan. He wanted to use Roar to lead the Roadrear cavalry. Given Roar's ability, he would naturally be able to subdue this army and have them slowly erase Adric's imprint. However, Father miscalculated. He did not expect his body to collapse so quickly. If Father could live for another half a year, he would not have let that army fall. Unfortunately, he died too early. Although Roar is capable, Father is worried that once he is gone, Adric's power would become unstoppable. Thus, he could only sacrifice the Roadrear cavalry. Father never truly trusted Adric. Choosing him as the new flag of the army was a helpless decision. Roar's reputation is too bad and cannot be used. Adric is the only choice, however. He has not pledged his loyalty to the imperial family. This fellow is too sympathetic to the Senate. He always has those unrealistic ideas. Father, he will threaten the imperial family. By promoting him, he will also restrict him. As his trump card, the Roadrear cavalry cannot be allowed to stay. The ban is over. I have been writing 10,000 words for 3 days straight. How tiring, everyone, for the sake of Little Five's hard work these past few days, please give me some more votes. Votes are very important to me. Thank you, everyone. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 372. Gior Chapter 352 Mission. The more the young emperor spoke, the more hurried he became. However, his voice also became lower and lower. Gradually, his eyes were filled with a dense haze. In the end, his eyes flashed with a kind of madness that made one's heart turn cold. I am the emperor of this empire, the supreme existence of this empire, the ruler of this empire. When he said those words, Garcia's tone carried a strange, heavy and disgusted tone. He sneered. Father has paved the way for me. He has even thought of every step of the plan and made arrangements. Although the current situation is dangerous, as long as I carefully follow the path left behind by Father, there is at least a 50% chance that I can hold on until the day the situation turns for the better. But all of this was arranged by him, all of it, every step of the way. I have become the emperor, but I feel as if he is still alive. After saying that, Wu Ran raised his hand and pointed at the empty chair beside the table. The expression on his face faintly distorted and ferocious. At this moment, where does Garcia look like the meticulous prince that he is? I am standing here, but I feel as if he is still sitting on this chair, holding a knife and cutting beef. Using his unique arrogant tone, he gave out orders and made decisions one by one. Yes, he has made all the decisions. Damn it, he has made all the decisions. Although I am the crown prince, he has never truly trusted me. No, it should be said that this old man has never trusted anyone, not even Cavashir. He has only ever trusted himself and his own arrogant and foolish decisions. The young emperor suddenly became furious. He clenched his fists and looked at the shadow in the corner. Do you know? I have put in so much effort into the 13th Corps. When I first arrived there, I lived in the same barracks as the ordinary soldiers. I ate the coarse and unpalatable food and went out with them every day. Every night, I would crawl back to my bed like a dead dog. When I woke up the next day, my whole body was in so much pain that it felt as if my bones were about to fall apart. I have spent so much effort in order to establish my own influence in this Iron Army. I have almost done it. In the 13th Corps, most of the lower and middle-ranking officers have a good impression of me. Even Roar has begun to look at me in a new light. When the 13th Corps arrived outside the imperial capital, I personally took off my shirt and stood in front of the battlefield without dodging the arrows. I beat the drums for the soldiers. Tens of thousands of people saw me, and I could feel the gratitude and reverence in the eyes of the soldiers. Damn it, I have almost done it. If I am given time to defend and do what I want to do, I am confident that I can establish the loyalty of this army. But because of him, because of his damned, arrogant and opinionated decision, all of my efforts of the past few months have been wasted. An army that might have been loyal to me was about to be destroyed because of the worries in his head. When did he ask for my opinion? Since he wants to hand this empire over to me, when did he ask for my opinion? The roar caused the veins on Garcia's forehead to bulge out and his eyes to become bloodshot, seemingly on the verge of spitting out flames. Finally, after a long time, he gradually calmed down. He exhaled deeply and turned to the corner. Do you have anything to say? The middle-aged man in the corner raised his hand and said in a cold voice, I am just a shadow, besides, I have said enough today. Your Majesty. When he said the words Your Majesty, there seemed to be a trace of ridicule in his voice. Then, the middle-aged man stood quietly in the corner and said nothing. Garcia turned his head and looked at the dining table. More and more disgust appeared in his eyes. Men! The emperor called out, and the doors of the palace were immediately opened. Several servants in linen robes ran in with their heads lowered. Garcia pointed to the dining table and chair and said in a cold voice, "I don't want to see this table, and this chair, and these things, everything in this room, those shelves, cabinets, and the lampstands on the wall." The young emperor's voice was cold, which caused the palace servants standing in front of him to tremble a little. The head of the palace servants looked up. "Your Majesty, these things should all be— take them out and burn them all." The coronation of the new emperor was probably the most simple one in the empire in the last few hundred years. The ceremony in the St. Sophia Cathedral was only completed in a hurry. The Pope of the Empire personally put on the crown for the new emperor, handed over the scepter, and gave his blessings at the same time. There was no gun salute, no grand parade, and even when His Majesty put on the crown, there was the rumbling of war drums and the sound of fighting outside the city. With the death of the old emperor and the coronation of the new emperor, the civilians in Osgiliath city were deeply terrified. However, with the support of the old Prime Minister, Adric, and the others, the situation was still barely stable. The fleet of the Kingdom of Lantis at sea also fired cannons outside the port area that night. It was said that they drove away several rebel ships that tried to approach the port during the night. There were still tens of thousands of troops in the city and a powerful fleet at sea. In any case, the civilians in Osgiliath city still had some hope. In the days after the coronation of the new emperor, the rebel army outside the city seemed to be attacking more urgently, as if they wanted to take advantage of the change of imperial power in the city to take advantage of the fear of the people. However, they were driven back time and time again by the defenders. At the most intense time, Adric even stood on the city walls to command. After the coronation, the first thing the new emperor did was to immediately have an urgent meeting with the Pope. Only a few important ministers of the empire knew that His Majesty Garcia had once again made a request to the Pope. He wanted the Empire's Magic Academy to order the magicians to participate in the war and help the Empire's army quell the rebellion. However, this request was once again rejected by the Pope. When the old emperor was still alive, he had made a similar request, but it did not receive the Pope's approval. These damned scoundrels! The Church's reason was simple. The Church should not interfere in worldly power disputes unless it was a matter of faith. If it was a holy war against the Odin pagans in the north, then the Church would naturally be duty-bound. However, both sides of the war were God's people, in the Pope's words, so the Church could not interfere. This reason was undoubtedly lame. Since the Emperor was regarded as the representative of God in the mortal world, and since the Pope personally blessed and acknowledged the Emperor during his coronation, it was a religious acknowledgement of the Emperor's legitimacy. Since there were people challenging this legitimate imperial power, the Church should stand up and defend the authority of the Emperor. These scoundrels are just waiting for the right price to sell. It was said that after the meeting that day, His Majesty Garcia walked out of the church with an ugly expression. These old scoundrels, to them, whoever becomes the Emperor is inseparable from them. Perhaps Hughes and those fellows have already made some promises to them. To be honest, the Empire's church had never had a close relationship with the imperial family. The reason was simple. Throughout the history of the Byzantine Empire for thousands of years, the church had always been firmly suppressed. If one were to look back at history, one would discover that before the establishment of the Byzantine Empire, the church's influence in the southern part of the continent was still very large. In that era, large and small kingdoms maintained respect for the church. Even the succession of the king's throne had to be acknowledged by the church before it could take effect. In some of the weaker kingdoms, the church even had a certain amount of power to levy taxes. At that time, the church's headquarters even had a territory the size of a county as the Pope's direct jurisdiction. But after the Byzantine Empire unified the southern part of the continent, all of this came to an end. The first thing the founding emperor did after the establishment of the empire was to establish the status of the theocracy and the imperial family, firmly suppressing the church's theocracy. Although the church was still recognized as the only religion in the empire, but from then on, the church no longer had its own parish territory, and no longer had its own right to levy taxes. It could be said that the church no longer had any capital to interfere with secular right. Instead, it was completely worshipped and treated as a spiritual decoration. The church was not allowed to own its own land, property, or any industry. The church was the church, a sacred place to serve God. These decrees completely strangled the possibility of the expansion of the theocracy from its root. Until now, the only thing the church could still offer was a leader in the magic union. But it seemed that this leader was not very powerful. Perhaps the ones who wanted the fall of the Byzantium royal family the most were the high-ranking scoundrels in the St. Sophia Cathedral. Philip sat on the horse, and was already a little shaky. The horse under him was already in a terrible state, with white foam spurting out from its mouth and nose. On this rugged mountain road, its running speed was getting slower and slower. Philip could barely keep his eyes open, but his whole body was so sore that it was almost falling apart. Especially when he was injured again a few days ago. In the inn in Jiao Town, he met the girl who claimed to be Sir Shea's woman, and fought with the guy with the long scissors. Unfortunately, after the two girls ran away, Philip could no longer catch up. He took a fierce blow from Dax and was seriously injured. He vomited blood on the spot and fell down. After that, he even fainted. Fortunately, the owner of the inn was grateful to Shea and the others for helping him drive away the bride, and took good care of Philip. Philip was unconscious for a long time before he woke up, but he could no longer find Dax and the others. He was angry and worried about the girl who claimed to be Sir Shea's woman. But then Philip did not dare to delay. A woman was still a woman after all, and Sir Shea had given him a more important task that he had yet to complete. Philip knew the importance of this matter. The reason why he took action before was because he happened to run into it, and naturally could not sit back and do nothing. But now that he had missed it, he had more important things to do, and there was no reason to delay it. Even if he went back, Sir Shea would not blame him for it. Philip did not have time to recuperate, and immediately continued on his way. He left Jiao Town and headed south, and in a few days, he left the border of Assyria. But if he went any further south, he would enter the military districts of Armenia. This was the territory of one of the rebel leaders, Hughes, and it would not be so easy to travel. Philip could only avoid the main roads as much as possible and choose to walk on the smaller path. For the sake of speed, he had to travel day and night. His body gradually weakened, and his injuries flared up again, but he could only grit his teeth and persevere. Philip's heart was very utilitarian. He was very clear that whether or not he could establish his position in Shea's small group would depend on whether or not he could complete this mission beautifully. So, he actually put his life on the line and ignored his injuries to continue on his way. He was so tired that he almost vomited blood. That night, Philip walked on a mountain path. This was already the territory of the military districts of Armenia, and it was close to the southwest. The military districts of Armenia produced iron ore and had the most mountainous areas. This path was in the mountains, and it was very secluded. Very few people knew about it. Philip had spent a gold coin to ask a mountain hunter from a village he passed by before. This path just happened to pass by an abandoned iron ore mine, but it could go straight through the mountains. Speaking of which, it was closer than walking on the main road. During the night, Philip did not have time to eat, and the dry rations he had on him were all used up. He could only hold a water bag and drink until he was half full. To prevent himself from falling off the horse due to his weak body, Philip used a rope to tie his legs to the saddle. The bumpy road constantly pulled at his injuries, and Philip was in so much pain that his face turned pale. They had just turned a corner when Philip, still in a daze, suddenly heard a short whistle by his ear. He suddenly woke up and opened his eyes wide, but it was too late. A net fell from above and covered him. Then, the horse under him suddenly fell forward. It turned out that the horse's hooves had tripped on the rope on the ground. Philip's body was already weak to begin with, and because his legs were tied to the saddle, he was unable to dodge and fell to the ground. His head spun as he hurriedly pulled out his dagger and ruthlessly cut the rope tied to the saddle. However, several figures had already pounced on him from his left and right. 7 to 8 hands firmly held him down, and then a cold blade was pressed against Philip's neck. A thief? Philip's heart skipped a beat, but then he saw a figure holding a sword and ruthlessly stabbing it into his heart. Philip sighed in his heart. He hated that he would die here, but his body was held down, and he could only close his eyes and wait for death. But at that moment, he suddenly heard a cold voice, "Wait! A recommendation ticket, reach out for the recommendation ticket. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading." Chapter 373. GOR Chapter 353 Extreme Audacity. Philip was lifted up and the net on his body was pulled away. However, he could clearly sense that the two fellows holding him down were very experienced. They were holding his wrist and arm joint. At the very least, if he dared to struggle, they would be able to break his arm at any moment. This kind of skillful technique was clearly something that only a veteran in the army would know. Why are these guys hiding in such a remote place? Philip finally got a good look at the two men behind him. They were both wearing the uniforms of the Byzantine Empire, but they didn't have any badges on their chests. Philip thought to himself. He couldn't believe that these two men were hiding in such a remote place. At the very least, he was certain that these fellows were not rebels. When he reached that line of thought, Philip's mind immediately became active. To travel in the middle of the night and choose such a remote and difficult to find path. The voice that shouted, "Wait a minute," rang out before him. Philip raised his head and saw a man standing before him. This man was looking down at him. His hair was somewhat messy, and he was also wearing the uniform of the Byzantine army. However, the collar of his uniform was unbuttoned, revealing the white inner robe underneath. This man appeared very young, probably only in his 20s. However, the way he looked at Philip gave off a sense of calmness, as though everything was under his control. The way he spoke was neither hurried nor slow. "It seems you must have some urgent matter that cannot be revealed. That is why you would rush to this place." Philip bit his lips and chose to remain silent. The man who spoke tilted his head to the side. Someone beside him had already taken Philip's luggage and bag and opened it up. They only found a few gold coins, a handful of copper coins and some medicine. Other than that, they did not find anything else. Philip could be considered a shrewd fellow. His long journey to imperial capital Australia required him to pass through enemy-occupied areas. How could he dare to bring anything that would reveal his identity? Naturally, he could not bring along the uniform and insignia of the Moore County's garrison army. The young man before him was not surprised that he did not find anything of value. Instead, he nodded his head. "Very good. The things you have on you are very clean. This means that you are a very shrewd and careful person. However, it's a pity that it's too clean. Instead, it'll make people suspicious." He looked at Philip and said, "It's impossible for a normal person to not bring anything that can reveal their identity when they go out. However, you don't have anything, which means that you're deliberately hiding your identity. This is the military districts of Armenia, and you are traveling while hiding your identity. There is only one possibility: you are an enemy of Armenia or the rebel group." "Well, you look like you're in a hurry, but you're clearly a martial artist. So, you must be a messenger from the army. Which army are you from? 7th Corps or 6th Corps? Or are they the local garrisons of other counties? Philip was stunned. He did not expect the young man in front of him to be able to deduce so much just by looking at the items on his body that did not contain any information. He had already guessed most of it. The young man smiled and raised his hand to signal the two men behind Philip to release him. He walked over and patted Philip on the shoulder. Well, your expression proves that my guess is correct. It seems that you are one of us. You don't have to worry. We are not the rebel army. We are the Central Army of the Empire. Philip stood up and looked around him. There were 7 to 8 burly men with a valiant aura around them. They clearly had a murderous aura around them. More importantly, although these men were standing on the ground, many of them had their legs curled up as if they were used to it. It was obvious that they were bow-legged out of habit. Philip had been in the army for a while now. When he saw their legs, he immediately recognized them. These fellows were clearly cavalry. Looking at Philip's eyes sweeping across the legs of his men, the young man smiled. It seems that you do have some eyesight. No need to guess, we are. After saying that, the young man's voice suddenly became rough. He seemed to hesitate for a moment. Then, his voice became low. We could be considered as the Roadrear cavalry. Roadrear? Philip's eyes lit up and he stared at the young man in excitement. Roadrear? The 13th Corps. Wasn't he here on Shea's orders to look for the 13th Corps? The dejected aura of the young man only flashed for a moment before he regained his handsome appearance. My name is Reinhardt. May I ask which corps you are from, sir? Please tell me your identity. After a moment, Philip finished explaining his background. Reinhardt seemed to be startled. The expression on his face was somewhat strange. He stared at Philip for a while before letting out a long sigh. He muttered, "It seems that Shea Thunder really has some foresight. He actually knew to send someone to contact Lord Roar." After saying that, Reinhardt's expression changed again. He stared at Philip and said in a low voice, "Well, it's fortunate that you met us. Otherwise, I'm afraid that you would have made a wasted trip. You don't have to go to the Imperial capital. The main force of the Roadrear cavalry has already entered the city. Even if you go there, you won't be able to see Lord Roar and the Crown Prince." Pausing for a moment, he let out a bitter laugh. Even now, whether or not the Roadrear cavalry still exists is a question. Philip was at a loss. Reinhardt had already clapped his hands. Immediately, a few figures flashed around them. "Clean this place up. Don't leave any traces. Let's go back." Philip was led by these people. The young man named Reinhardt walked side by side with him. Along the way, he casually chatted with Philip in a low voice from time to time. What he said seemed to be some very casual topics. Occasionally, he would ask some seemingly inconspicuous questions. But unknowingly, he had dug out some of Philip's background and experience. By the time Philip reacted, the young man had even dug out the fact that he had once been part of the Warriors' Corps. The group of people took a detour on the mountain road for a while. After taking a few forks in the road, they soon arrived at the back of the mountain. There was a half-open cave here. The entrance of the cave had already been dug out. If it were to rain, it would probably become a leaky spoon. Looking at the terrain along the way, Philip recognized that this was probably the abandoned old mine in the mountain that the hunter who told him the location of the path had mentioned. There was a mine here that had been exhausted a few years ago and had been abandoned since then. When they arrived in front of the cave, before Philip could react, he heard a whistling sound. Hundreds of figures sprang out from the hillsides and caves on both sides. Everyone held sharp sabers in their hands. Some of them even held short crossbows and stood on the hillside, looking down at them covetously. "They're all our men." Reinhardt smiled. There was some embarrassment in his smile. "We're in a dangerous place. We have to be careful." Philip was a little shocked. Looking at these valiant soldiers, they obviously looked like elites who had been through hundreds of battles. Each of them had the kind of indifference that only veterans would have. After walking into the half-open valley, they discovered that there was actually a large patch of grass at the back of the mountain. There was a large group of horses and a number of tents. Most of the people were living in the abandoned cave. Philip took a rough look and estimated that there were at least 2,000 to 3,000 people. Although the valley wasn't small, it was inevitable that it would be a little crowded to accommodate so many people. However, these people were obviously elite. Although there were so many people hiding in the valley, they were orderly. There wasn't the slightest bit of noise and chaos. Instead, it was awe-inspiring. Philip's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. He was now more convinced that the other party was the Roadrear cavalry. Reinhardt led Philip into the mine with a half-open skylight. The real space of this mine was underground, while the upper level was spacious. Philip casually dismissed his subordinates and pointed to a stone on the ground, saying with a smile, "This place is very simple, please take a seat, Your Excellency." Philip's heart was filled with bewilderment as he sat across from Reinhardt. Reinhardt sized up Philip a few more times before solemnly bowing and slowly saying, "From Moore County to here, it's a distance of 1,000 miles. On the way, we're all in enemy territory with layers upon layers of checkpoint. Sir, you're all alone, yet you're able to travel 1,000 miles and pass through so many enemy territory. Just this courage alone is admirable. My men have offended you just now. I'm here to ask for your forgiveness." Philip hurriedly stood up to return the bow. Reinhardt smiled and said, "Speaking of which, Your Honorable Sir Shea Thunder has some connections with our 13th Corps. Sir Shea was originally from the 13th Corps. Therefore, strictly speaking, we are all on the same side." Philip said a few more polite words, but this Reinhardt looked at Philip and leisurely said, "Your Excellency came from far away and asked to see Sir General Roar, but I don't know what kind of message Sir Shea Laming wants you to send? Is it a request for help? Or something else?" He looked deeply at Philip as he said this. Philip was a little hesitant. After all, the mission that Shea had given him was an important matter. How could he casually tell others about it? While he was hesitating, he heard Reinhardt continue to speak. His voice was relaxed and casual, as if there was no anger in it at all. "The situation in the north has deteriorated. The various military regions that the rebel army has occupied have already raised the rebel flag. Odin's men have also invaded the country. Originally, we thought that the north had already been scorched. We didn't expect that there would still be a hero of the Empire like Sir Shea Thunder who is struggling to support the situation. It is truly admirable. However, even though Sir Shea Thunder is a genius and has the intention to bring about change in the north and create a new structure, I'm afraid that there will still be some restrictions." After pausing for a moment, Reinhardt deliberately let out a long sigh and deliberately looked into Philip's eyes. "I wonder what official position Sir Shea Laming is currently holding, and what is his military position?" Philip's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He said, Sir Shea is now the acting county governor of Moore County. As for his military position, he is still the commanding officer of the local garrison. Moore County only has an emblem group. Sir Shea's position is too small." Reinhardt smiled to himself. When he said this, there was a deeper meaning in his tone. Philip was frightened by the gaze of this powerful young man. He only felt that there was a hidden meaning in his words. It was obvious that he had already seen through his intentions. After a slight hesitation, Philip said openly, "Our Sir Shea sent me to the imperial capital to request for an order. Sir has the intention to take care of the mountains and rivers in the north, resist the foreign enemies, and wipe out the rebels. However, in order to unite the various forces, Sir needs a status and identity. Otherwise, how can he convince others? Therefore, he sent me to the imperial capital. On one hand, it is to report the situation in the north to the superiors. On the other hand, it is to request for an identity for our Sir so that he can achieve something. Reinhardt replied with a His tone was still calm, but the words he said made Philip's heart skip a beat. He heard the young officer say with a smile, Sir Shea, how big of an official position do you want to be? General? Commander of the war zone? Or something else? Philip was stunned. He thought to himself, these questions are not up to you and me to decide. What's the use of saying this? How many soldiers are there in Moore County now? Reinhardt asked. Philip hesitated for a moment but still said frankly, when I left, there were already some people from the 6th Corps who came to join us. They are General Ruhr's former subordinate. It seems Sir Shea sending you to find Sir Ruhr is a good idea. If you cannot get an official position, you can get Sir Ruhr to write a letter. That way, you will be able to get those people from the 6th Corps to join us. After saying that, Reinhardt smiled and continued, Unfortunately, Sir Shea Thunder's idea is good, but you came a few days late. However, you are lucky to have met us. Philip was at a loss after hearing this fellow's words. Reinhardt suddenly smiled. In front of Philip, he turned around and rummaged through the shelves behind him. In the end, he pulled out several documents and laid them flat in front of him. He prepared a pen and pondered for a moment before quickly writing on a blank document. After he was done, he picked it up and blew on it. Then, he rummaged through his bag for a while before saying with a smile, Thankfully, these things are not lost. Otherwise, it would take a lot of time to get another set. What this fellow pulled out was actually a clump of grindstone. This type of item was something that sculptors would use to play with. Reinhardt held the clump of grindstone and pulled out a document from the past. He looked at the mark on the surface of the document and carefully studied it. Then, he pulled out a small dagger and quickly began carving. His movements were very skillful, and in just a moment, he had carved out a shape. He sighed and said, It has been a long time since I did this. My hands are getting rusty. After saying that, he added some ink and stamped it onto the document. He picked it up and gave it a few glances before handing it to Philip. He smiled and said, This item should be able to help Sir Shea. Philip received it and gave it a look. His eyes widened and his face turned pale. The contents of the document were as follows. Investigating His Excellency Baron Shea Thunder, former military officer of Moore County, for his outstanding bravery and meritorious service. He is hereby awarded this honor as a mark of commendation. With this order, Shea Thunder will be appointed as the Northern Military Commissioner of the Empire. He will be in charge of the military affairs of Moore County, Notsa County, Ilton County, and the border counties. He will be given the authority to act according to the circumstances. This member will be allowed to transfer the garrison troops from various places and train the new army. Shea Thunder will be appointed as the general of the new army and be given the authority to appoint other generals of various ranks. The military and government of various places must cooperate with each other without any delay. We hope that this member will display the courage of our people and expel the foreign invaders and the internal rebels. The signature at the bottom of the document was from the Imperial Military Headquarters. Other than that, there was also a signature and the personal seal of the Crown Prince, Garcia. This order of appointment, at least on the surface, seemed to be complete. And according to the contents of the book, it was even more frightening. With just a few simple sentences, it appointed Shea Laming as a Northern Military Region Commissioner, and at the same time gave him control over the military and political power of the northern counties. He was allowed to take in the garrisons of various places and train a new army. This was simply blatantly allowing him to incorporate other armies. With such an order, it was practically throwing the northern counties of the empire to Shea. Since the founding of the empire, other than the era of the founding war, There had never been such an exaggerated appointment for a general. Philip's mouth was wide open. He was stunned for a long time before he cried out, This is fake. It was obviously written by you just now. The signature was forged by you and the seal was also carved by you. You. Reinhardt's expression did not change. His smile was still gentle. Of course it's fake. How can such an appointment be real? However, this fake appointment is even better than the real one. Do you believe it? Ignoring Philip's shock, Reinhardt picked up the pen and paper again and started writing. After a while, he wrote a letter. Philip took a look at it and his face turned pale. This was obviously an imitation of General Ruhr's style of writing. It was a letter written to the old subordinates of the 6th Corps. This Reinhardt was really something. The way he wrote this letter, the way he wrote it, the way he laughed and scolded, it was exactly the style of a Ruhr. The content of the letter was nothing more than a warning to the brats of the 6th Corps to obediently listen to Sir Shea Thunder's words. You don't have to be surprised. I have been by Sir Ruhr's side as his staff officer for quite some time. Usually, when he is lazy, he likes to ask me to handle military documents on his behalf. That's why I can imitate his handwriting. As for his signature, I have previously signed many of his military documents on his behalf. No one could see through it. It's fake. It's all fake. What's the use of a fake? Philip did not know whether to laugh or cry. Plop! Philip was already sitting on the ground. This was a serious crime of forging an appointment from the Imperial Military Headquarters, forging the signature of the Crown Prince, and forging military documents. If you go back alone, it is naturally useless to bring this with you. However, if I go back with you with 3,000 Roadrear cavalrymen, and I am an officer of Sir Ruhr's personal guard battalion, the fake will become real. Reinhardt sneered. His expression was calm and his gaze was like lightning. A recommendation ticket, requesting recommendation ticket. This thing is really important to me. Please help me, to be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidien.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 375. Once again, I have to wait until 12 a.m. to update. However, I am not slacking off today. Rather, I am going all out. A 12,000-word update will naturally take a long time to write. Additionally, this is a very coherent story. If I were to break it up and post it every few thousand words, I fear that it would look very fragmented. Thus, I decided to endure it and finish writing it in one go before posting it up. Alright, I hope that everyone will kindly accept my 12,000-word outburst. However, after reading it, don't forget to reward me with a few tickets. Wiping your mouth and leaving after eating is not a good thing. GOR Chapter 354. Vicious and merciless. Philip considered himself to be a bold and vicious fellow. Back then, he was the leader of a warrior group, and could be considered as a hero. In order to avenge a personal grudge, he had once led a large group of men to openly rob and kill a caravan in the outskirts of the imperial capital. That time, he failed due to Shea's intervention. However, it was enough to prove that Philip was not a coward. At this moment, however, when facing this young man known as Reinhardt, Philip was so shocked that he was unable to react. Audacious! Audacious! At that moment, there was only one voice in Philip's mind. This young man is a madman. He was a complete and utter madman. He took 3 deep breaths and swallowed a few mouthfuls of saliva. Truth be told, due to his nervousness, Philip's throat and mouth were extremely dry. He struggled to steady his voice and said, I think your words are too crazy and absurd, Mr. Reinhardt. How could such an important document be forged? Why not? Reinhardt harumphed. His voice was filled with disdain, and he said in a casual tone, What is your concern? Legitimacy. Philip shook his head and said, My superior, Sir Shea, needs a legitimate identity to command the forces of the various systems under him. There must be a legitimate and authoritative identity in order for the various systems under him to obey. Could it be that a commissioner of the Northern Military Region, who controls the military and political power of the northern counties and can incorporate the garrisons of the various regions, this level of authority and position is not authoritative enough? Reinhardt laughed and said, I really cannot think of any higher official position. Unless your Sir Shea is directly appointed as the Minister of Military Affairs? Or the Prime Minister? No. Philip scratched his head angrily and growled anxiously, but this thing is King fake. It's fake. We can't give such a fake to Sir Shea. There was no way he could use such a forged document to command those unruly troops of the various factions. How could something like this be forged? This was child's play. Once anyone reports this to the military and asks around, they'll be exposed with a simple document. Reinhardt smiled. Philip realized that this young man looked very special when he smiled. The smile on his face was gentle and easygoing, and even had a hint of shyness that made people feel close to him. Although this young man smiled awkwardly and revealed a mouthful of white teeth, the words that came out of his mouth were frightening. Ask? Who would ask? How should I ask? This guy had a relaxed look on his face. Right now, Osgilla is surrounded like an iron bucket. Even a fly can't fly into the city. From Moore County to Osgilla, there are thousands of miles between them. Who would have the ability to ask? Unless they grow wings and fly all the way to Osgilla? Go to the military and ask for confirmation? What a joke. Pausing for a moment, this young man slowly raised 2 fingers. The second point is, Mr. Philip, it is obvious that you do not have any experience in holding an official position. Thus, you do not understand the old and rotten system within this system. Within this system, there are always some mysterious and wonderful things that you, as an outsider, might not understand. To put it simply, those various factions of the army that you speak of are nothing more than the defeated 6th Corps or the other garrisoned armies. Please remember this. These armies have either been defeated or have nowhere else to go. The Empire's military law is extremely harsh on those who lose their territory. The responsibility of losing their territory can result in a demotion to an official position and a death sentence. The most ingenious part of this forged document is that this appointment directly places the responsibility of defending the entire northern region on the head of your Lord Shea. As the Northern Military Commissioner, all the important military and political officials in the entire northern region, while obeying Lord Shea, the responsibility is also handed over to Shea. In other words, those military leaders who have lost their territory and garrison do not have to worry about being punished again. At this time, they will only hope that this matter will fade away. Who would be so foolish as to write a document and ask for confirmation from the Empire's military department? Are they not afraid that the Minister of Military Affairs will remember this matter and punish them for the crime of losing their territory? Philip was stunned. He had not thought of this point at all. However, he quickly reacted. But most of the northern region has been lost. If this responsibility is passed to our Lord Shea, won't he be the scapegoat? Idiot, have you forgotten that the appointment is fake? Reinhardt refuted Philip with a righteous tone. Philip rolled his eyes. So, after we bring this order back, those fellows below will most likely not have any doubts. It might even be an outcome that they wish for. Besides, Reinhardt laughed. The 6th Corps is General Ruhr's old subordinates. Among the several thousand Roadrear cavalrymen in my hands, there are a few that Lord Ruhr brought over from the 6th Corps. When the time comes, we will all be old comrades and acquaintances. The 6th Corps will not suspect anything. Besides, General Ruhr's personal guard, and Lord Ruhr's personal letter. Philip's face turned red. But But this kind of thing, even if it can be deceived for a while, it cannot be hidden forever. Once the situation changes and the roads and information flow are unblocked, there will be a point where it will be exposed. When that time comes, this is a serious crime. Forging military and imperial orders, pretending to be an important official of the empire, and taking over the local military and political power, this is probably the same as rebellion. At that time, our Lord Shea. The smile on Reinhardt's face gradually turned cold. He glanced at Philip, then slowly shook his head. Disappointment appeared on his face as he said, "If all the people under Master Shea's command are as knowledgeable as you are, then please return this order of appointment to me. I don't need to bring my men to Master Shea." Philip blushed. Reinhardt sighed. Short-sighted. "Well, it looks like you're not convinced. I'll waste some time explaining it to you." An arrogant expression suddenly appeared on the young man's face. However, in addition to this arrogance, there was a faint sense of confidence. Although his tone was cold, it was filled with an indescribable sense of confidence and certainty. Think carefully about your Lord Shea's current situation. The first possibility is that he can't get the appointment and title, so he can't command his subordinate. His subordinates are in a state of disunity. When the Odin's people recover, they will turn around and eliminate him. When that happens, your Lord Shea will be defeated and die for the country. Of course, from what I've heard about this lord, he probably won't do such a heroic thing. Most likely, he will lead his remaining soldiers to a corner deep in the mountains and become a bandit leader or a bandit leader. It had to be said that if Shea was standing here and heard Reinhardt's evaluation of him, he would definitely be so happy that he would clap his hands and shout soulmate. The second possibility, Sir Shea, is to make full use of this order and annex the different forces under your command one by one. Then, after reorganizing and gathering them, you will have the capital to compete with any enemy. When that time comes, he will be able to attack or retreat as he pleases. If he is suddenly possessed by the soul of the Duke of the Tulip family, he may be able to lead an army of tens of thousands to drive out foreign invaders, sweep away internal strife, and become a famous general of his generation. Or, if he strives to protect himself and protect the peace of the region, he will still be a loyal subject of the empire in the north. When that time comes, whether Sir Shea becomes a hero of the empire who recovers the homeland or a military town that guards the land, at that time, even if the empire learns that we forged Sir Shea's official position, let me tell you, at that time, if our emperor, the prime minister, the minister of military affairs, and the others don't all turn into idiots, then not only will they not expose Sir Shea's fake official position, but they will also pinch their noses and accept it. Not only will they accept it, they will even increase the rewards to consolidate Lord Shea's position. Philip's mouth was wide open as he stared at the young man. After a good while, he stammered, "You? How can you be so sure?" Philip did not believe it. He did not believe it from the bottom of his heart. Although he was also somewhat shrewd, he was only the leader of a warrior group after all. How could he have such a long-term strategy and knowledge of the world's general situation? Not only will the empire's upper echelons not expose it, they will also help His Excellency hide it? And even increase the rewards? What kind of joke is this? Let me be clear with you. Reinhardt was all smiles, but the cold glint in his eyes made Philip's heart turn cold. The northern part of the empire has already decayed. This large piece of land in the north no longer belongs to the empire. The empire's upper echelons, from the emperor to the prime minister, have already accepted the loss of this land. At this time, if your Lord Shea can turn the situation around in one fell swoop, lead tens of thousands of soldiers, recover the land, and do something inspiring, at this time, the empire's upper echelons will definitely be looking forward to it. The empire's national power has fallen to such a state, and the entire empire is gloomy and lethargic. At this time, The Empire needs a hero to step forward, and if Lord Shea can fulfill the role of this hero, then it can be considered as giving the Empire's upper echelons what they need. At this time, for the sake of the Empire's national power, for the sake of the people's morale, the Empire will never do something so stupid as to destroy what they rely on. Instead, they will increase the rewards for Lord Shea, give him countless halos and titles, and rely on him as a strong ally in the north. And let me put it more harshly. Reinhardt's next words almost made Philip faint. Let me put it more harshly. When that time comes, your lord will have tens of thousands of soldiers under his command. As long as he spends some time to reorganize these forces one by one, completely devouring them and firmly controlling them, everyone will be loyal to him. When that time comes, the Empire will be thousands of miles away, and the Emperor will be far away. Your Lord Shea has troops, provisions, territory, and prestige. Do you think that the Empire's upper echelons are all stupid pigs? Would they do something like this and offend your lord? Offend a powerful force with a large number of soldiers and outstanding achievements? When that time comes, the Empire's upper echelons will be too late to curry favor with you. At the very least, if Lord Shea is forced into a corner and he falls to Odin's side, to the rebel army, then that would be a bad thing. These words, sentence by sentence, case by case, analysis by analysis, had already caused Philip's mind to go blank as he listened to them. His heart was beating wildly. He only felt that this young man in front of him was simply a monster. How did he look like he was in his 20s? This guy was simply an old fox in human skin. If your lord's army is defeated and he dies, then it is because he is not capable or he has a bad fate. Reinhardt said indifferently, as long as he can gather the forces of the various tribes and gain a firm foothold, then there is no need to worry about this matter being exposed. It will be foolproof. Philip seemed to have been convinced, but then he thought about it. Shea had sent him to do such an important thing, and he had made a fake. He hesitated for a moment and said, "This is such a big matter, it needs to be kept a secret. But, how should I reply to Lord Shea? Should I hide it from him as well?" He felt a little uneasy in his heart, but Reinhardt laughed out loud and patted Philip's shoulder. He said with a meaningful smile, "Don't worry. I've heard those rumors. Your Sir Shea Laming is not a pure and simple person. If he is a pure and innocent person, he will not be able to survive in this chaotic world. You don't have to worry about this. Your Lord Shea will not punish you for this matter. Instead, he will be grateful to you." He stuffed the document into Philip's arms and said, "Pack it properly. I will go outside and instruct the troops to gather. We will set off now and head north to Moore County." He smiled and said, "I still have 3,000 Roadrear cavalrymen here. Your Lord Shea came from the Roadrear cavalrymen and can be considered his old comrades. It should be easy to subdue these 3,000 cavalrymen. With these 3,000 cavalrymen as a foundation, we can swallow up the other tribes one by one, break them up and reorganize them. Then we can arrange for loyal subordinate. In a few months at most, we will have eaten and drunk all of them. By then, the situation will be set and there will be nothing to worry about." Philip was dragged out of the mine by Reinhardt in a daze. When they were outside, Reinhardt summoned a few officers and gave a few orders. In less than a quarter of an hour, the thousands of soldiers in the valley had been reorganized. Other than those who were on sentry duty outside, most of the soldiers had gathered in the valley and were waiting for Reinhardt's orders. Reinhardt pulled Philip and walked to the front of the black mass of soldiers. Although it was night time, the thousands of soldiers in the valley were still neat and valiant under the moonlight and starlight. Reinhardt flipped over and jumped onto a rock. He looked down at the thousands of soldiers and took a deep breath. He shouted loudly, "Soldiers of the 13th Corps, listen up." He paused and continued, "I'm Reinhardt, the commander of the Personal Guard Battalion. I think most of you can recognize me. For the past few months, I've been wearing the glorious battle robes of the 13th Corps with all of you. We lived in tents together, ate military rations together, and did exercises together. As a human, I have one more thing than all of you. Lao Tzu is the commander of the General's Personal Guard Battalion. Therefore, I often have to listen to the General scolding me. Occasionally, when the General is angry, he will even kick my butt. The last sentence made some of the soldiers below burst into laughter, but it was a kind of laughter with tacit understanding. Then Reinhardt's tone changed. His eyes, even in the dark, were as bright as two sharp swords. Just a few days ago, on that night, all of you here experienced it with me. This sentence immediately caused the atmosphere below to freeze. Many of the soldiers couldn't help but lower their heads. Some of them had already secretly clenched their fists. Some of them looked sad and ferocious. I know that there are many of you who feel deep sorrow in your hearts. I know that there are many of you who feel deep shame in your hearts. I also know that there are many of you who feel incomparable hatred towards the order to retreat back then. I also know that all of you wished that you could follow those brothers who attacked that day and advance together with them. Die together with them in front of Ostjila. Because you are the glorious Rodrier cavalry. In your hearts you think that you are deserters. You think that you are disgraced and sinful. In your hearts you wish that you could stab yourself twice, isn't that right? When the word deserter entered everyone's ears, more than half of them struggled to raise their heads and stare fiercely at Reinhardt. Some of them roared in the darkness. Lao Tzu is not a deserter. Rodrier cavalry is not a deserter. Lao Tzu didn't want to stay that day. Why didn't you let us die that day? We are not cowards. Sir, bring us to kill the rebels. We are all willing to die on the battlefield. Many of them roared out in anger, causing Reinhardt's eyes to light up. This young man mustered up his courage and shouted loudly. Silence! Silence! Listen to what Lao Tzu has to say. After he shouted twice, under the order of the officers below, they immediately quieted down. I know that you are unwilling to accept it. You feel wronged. You feel vexed. Reinhardt sighed and slowly said, Actually, how can I not be one of them? If I had a choice, on that day I also wanted to charge together with General Rohr. Even if I had to die on the battlefield. Even if I have to die together with my comrades. After saying that, he puffed out his chest and stood up straight like a javelin. Facing the thousands of gazes directed at him from below, he shouted loudly. However, you must remember this. We are soldiers. We are soldiers. The duty of soldiers is to die for the country. We are not afraid of death. However, we are afraid that after we die, we will not be able to complete our duty and mission. I know that you feel wronged and vexed. Let me tell you now. On that day we did not go together to kill the rebels, we did not charge together, we did not spill our blood together with the blood of our fallen comrades. It is not because we are deserters, nor is it because we are cowards. It is because we have something more important to do. I can assure you that our mission is far more difficult than death. It can even be said that from this moment onwards, most of you will experience hardships and dangers that no one can describe. You will face an encounter that is even more terrifying than death. What you will face is an enemy that is even more terrifying than the rebels. Reinhardt roared out in a thunderous voice. Are you afraid? Without hesitation, thousands of voices rang out at the same time. No. Good. Then I will tell you. Reinhardt raised his hand and pointed to the north. It is in the north. At this moment. At this moment. At this moment when our country is facing its most difficult predicament in 100 years. At this moment when those rebels who have betrayed our country are stirring up trouble. To our north, thousands of li away, those Odin people, those vicious and brutal barbarians, have taken advantage of our internal strife to kill their way into our country. Most of you here are veterans of the Rodrier army. Most of you have followed the army to the border during General Adric's era and have fought countless battles against the Odin people. Some of you have followed General Rohr from the 6th Corps and have killed Odin people before. We have made those Odin people suffer in our hands. Back then, when our country was not embroiled in internal strife, no matter how vicious and valiant those Odin people were, when have we ever been afraid of them? We have fought countless bloody battles and succeeded in stopping those barbarians from entering Wildfire Plains, stopping them from entering our home. We have never allowed those barbarians to take a single step into our country. But now, at this moment, those barbarians, those hateful barbarians have taken advantage of our internal strife to break down our home and charge into our country. To the north, at this moment, those barbarians have invaded our land, killed our people, bullied our wives and daughters, burned our cities and farmlands, and snatched away the last bit of food from the farmers. Tell me, brave Rodrier cavalry. Tell me, can you allow this to continue happening? Tell me, can the sabers in your hands allow those bastards' claws to stand on our land? No! Reinhardt shouted out sternly. We are the Rodrier cavalry. We are glorious warriors. Right now, the Empire needs us to bleed and die. As soldiers, we cannot choose where we die. I know you want to fight to the death with those rebels. However, the current situation in the north is even worse than in Ostjilla. The order we received is for us to go to the north and expel those invaders. You may not have the chance to die in Ostjilla, you may not have the chance to die here. But your blood will be spilled in the north, in Moore County, in Ilton County, in Notts County, in the thousands of miles of fertile land in the north of the Empire. This is our mission. It may be easy to die in Ostjilla, but in the north, we will face a more difficult situation than here. There are our old rivals, the Black Flag Army and Hastings. There is the Scarlet Snow Army. And the Thundercloud Army. We are leaving this place, not to become deserters. It is because the Empire needs us to die in a place that needs our blood more. Right now, in the direction my finger is pointing to, there are the Black Flag Army, the Scarlet Snow Army, the Thundercloud Army, and hundreds of thousands of Odin barbarians who are even more ferocious and brutal than the rebels. I will bring you there now. Use your sabers to drive those barbarians back to the north. Use your sabers to cut off the heads of those barbarians and hang them on the border. Do you dare to follow me? Looking at the thousands of soldiers whose blood and fighting spirit had been successfully aroused by Reinhardt, and looking at the excited faces of almost every soldier below with blood-red eyes, they were like howling wild beasts. Looking at such a scene, Philip, who was standing at the side, suddenly had a complicated feeling in his heart. He raised his head and looked at Reinhardt, who was standing upright above, and a strange thought came to his mind. This young man is too scary. After successfully arousing the morale, the thousands of Rodrier remnants trapped in the valley suddenly swept away the decadence of these days and glowed with a fervent fighting spirit. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Reinhardt even made a move in public. He took out the forged appointment in public and announced that he would lead His Excellency to the north to seek refuge with the governor of Moore County, Shea Thunder. He also announced that the Empire had ordered His Excellency Shea Thunder to be the military affairs envoy of the north, to command the military and political power of several counties in the north. Although this appointment made many officers a little puzzled, they recalled that General Rohr had indeed left a warrant for them to follow Reinhardt's orders to go to the north before the majority of the Rodrier soldiers charged at the enemy that day. Therefore, the appointment that Reinhardt took out now was probably issued by General Rohr and the Crown Prince before they set off. Moreover, Reinhardt timely pushed Philip out, stating Philip's identity. He was a subordinate of Sir Shea from Moore County, and was the special envoy sent to communicate. This further dispelled the doubts in everyone's hearts. Of course, the most important thing was to go to the north to seek refuge under His Excellency Shea. This candidate was someone that the thousands of roadrear remnants in the valley could accept. Shea Thunder was born in the roadrear cavalry. One had to admit that paying attention to one's background and seniority was an unavoidable tradition in the army of any era. Although Shea Thunder did not stay in the roadrear cavalry for too long, he had experienced the tragic Battle of Albacete Plains with everyone. In a difficult situation, he had led a small portion of the troops that stayed behind to guard the camp and fought a bloody battle with Hastings's Black Flag army. There was also the magnificent feat of dueling Hastings. Although the higher-ups had given the credit to the pitiful Rabbit Bonfreet, everyone in the roadrear cavalry knew that the one who wounded Hastings on the battlefield that day was Shea Thunder. Moreover, during that battle, Shea's performance was outstanding. The bravery and ability he displayed were all above average. Furthermore, he was once General Adric's personal guard. Many of the veterans in the army were on good terms with him. In the final battle, Shea led 200 cavalrymen of various brands to charge into the enemy formation, carving out a path of blood to rescue the tens of thousands of besieged troops from his own side. Finally, at the entrance of the camp, he hugged the corpse of the bald man Kevin and howled in anguish. This was something that countless people witnessed with their own eyes. It could be said that Shea Thunder had long been accepted by the roadrear cavalry as one of their own. After that, Shea Thunder was rewarded by the Empire. Then, he received a special commendation and an important task from the Emperor. When the news spread, many of the roadrear cavalry felt a sense of honor. Look, that amazing fellow is also one of our roadrear cavalry. Additionally, Shea's subordinates were quite a number of veterans from the roadrear cavalry. Everyone could be considered as one of our own. If they were to go to the north and have to listen to the commands of some random Tom, Dick or Harry, these arrogant cavalrymen might feel dissatisfied. However, this fellow Shea Thunder was not an issue. As for the appointment that Reinhardt brought out, it would appear that the appointment was too big TSK. That is an amazing character from our roadrear cavalry. Every single one of our roadrear kingdom's members is a hero. So what if he is appointed as a special envoy? Even if he were to become a general in the military, it would not be too much. The fighting spirit of the roadrear cavalry was aroused. After receiving Reinhardt's order, it took only a short amount of time for them to reorganize and assemble. Before dawn, the army set off. The entire army had a total of 4,464 men and less than 3,000 horses. Earlier, they had more horses. However, as they were hiding in this valley, the army had killed off some of the weaker war horses to serve as food. As for the fact that they were still within the territory of the Armenian rebels, the journey from here to Moore County to meet up with Shea Thunder's army required them to traverse thousands of li. They also had to pass through countless enemy-occupied areas. These headaches were not something the soldiers were worried about. What is there to be afraid of? We are the roadrear cavalry. We never care if there is a problem with our orders, we only care about moving forward. No matter what kind of enemies lie ahead, we will kill them, defeat them. We only care about moving forward. The soldiers below could be ignored. However, leading thousands of men through thousands of li of enemy-occupied areas was an important task that gave Reinhardt a headache. As the army was reorganizing, Reinhardt summoned some of the officers into the mine for an urgent discussion. Philip was unable to help with these matters and could only watch the army gather outside. It was not until dawn that Reinhardt walked out from the mine with a group of officers with bloodshot eyes. The young man's eyes were bloodshot, but he did not appear nervous. He maintained his relaxed smile. Philip was somewhat worried. He walked over and whispered, "This journey to the north is quite a long journey. Bringing so many men with us, I fear that before we can even make it out of Armenia, we will be entangled by the rebels. We have no supplies, no reinforcements, thousands of men alone, I fear." After exchanging glances with each other, those military officers standing beside Reinhardt suddenly burst out into laughter. One of the officers gave Philip a punch and whispered, "Sir Philip, you do not need to worry about this issue. I might as well tell you. Although we are now the Roadrear Cavalry, just half a year ago, we were under the command of General Rohr of the 6th Corps." Another officer also laughed and said, "Don't worry, we only need to run. I guarantee that those rebels will not even be able to catch up with us." As he said that, the officer looked at Philip meaningfully and smiled. "When it comes to running away, I'm afraid there aren't many people in the world who are better at it than us." Cold sweat broke out on Philip's forehead. In the wee hours of the morning, the army was assembled. Following Reinhardt's order, the whole army set off and left the valley. They came out of the mountains and headed for the main road. The 4,000 cavalry were in a hurry. Although there was a shortage of horses and the condition of the horses was not good, Reinhardt did not seem to have any intention of caring about the horses. Instead, he ordered the whole army to speed up, regardless of the consumption of horses, and set off at full speed. Although there were horses that did not fall down and die along the way, the cavalry would rather ride in pairs and rush on with all their might. 2 days later, the 4,000 Roadrear cavalry raided a small town in the north of the military districts of Armenia. Because this small town was located in the north of Armenia, far away from Ostjila, it was considered the rear of the military districts of Armenia. At the same time, the north bordered the military districts of the other rebels. This small town became a transit point for the other rebels to transport supplies and military equipment. Because of the urgent situation in Ostjila, and because this was the rear of the army, there were very few troops stationed here. There were only 2 battalions and less than 1,000 people, including the auxiliary troop. The surprise attack of 4,000 cavalrymen only took 1 charge to break into the city. What happened next was a one-sided situation. Reinhardt then ordered the supplies piled up in more than a dozen warehouses to be swept clean. There were also more than 400 military horses in the town. In addition, there were also more than 800 horses and livestock used to pull the carriages. All of them were seized by the 4,000 cavalry. For the Roadrear cavalry who were seriously lacking in mobility, this was a great supplement. Several former officers of the 6th Corps came up with the same plan. They gathered all the carriages in the city and loaded them with a large amount of food and supplies. Even the uniforms and armor of the Armenian rebels in the 2 warehouses in the city were all taken by Reinhardt. Under his orders, the whole army changed into high-quality light iron armor made in Armenia and held excellent iron sabers made in Armenia. Then, they set fire to the warehouses and buildings in the town. Following that, the 4,000 cavalry left. After receiving the war horses, mules, horses, and carriages, the Roadrean cavalrymen had their mobility guaranteed. Then, Reinhardt ordered them to split up. At this moment, it was undoubtedly a risky move to split up the already weak forces. However, this audacious Reinhardt actually dared to do so. In order to conquer Ostjila, that guy Hughes wants to be the king so badly that his eyes are red. His base and rear have long been emptied of his forces. Here, he doesn't have any mobile forces to deal with us. Everyone agreed with Reinhardt's reasoning. Then, the 4,000 cavalry were divided into 4 groups of 1,000. Then, they went north in 4 different directions. In 3 days, the 4 groups disguised as Armenian rebels raided 4 small towns on the northern border of Armenia and seized a lot of supplies. They continued to replenish their horses and mules to maintain their mobility over long distances. At the same time, every time they arrived at a place, they would burn all the resources in the town. For a time, 4 beacons were lit in the northern part of Armenia almost at the same time. Sure enough, there were too few mobile forces left in Armenia. The generals who stayed behind were not outstanding people. Facing the 4 beacons, they were vigilant, thinking that there was a large enemy force. They did not dare to disperse their forces to rescue them. They could only give orders to restrain their forces and quickly send someone to the front line to inform Hughes for a decision. By the time Hughes received the news that his base had been raided, the Rodreer cavalry had already left the northern border of Armenia and entered Asriya County. After entering Asriya County, the 4 groups of cavalry that had been completely converted into mules and horses successfully joined forces at the predetermined rendezvous point and conquered a small town on the border of Asriya County in one fell swoop. At this time, among the 4,000 cavalry, the number of livestock per person had reached 2. There were still not many warhorses. There were also a large number of carriages accompanying them. Then Reinhardt ordered that they continue to head north without rest. The army once again divided into a small group of 500 people. Reinhardt assigned the carriages to the small group of 500 people. With great fanfare, they wore the Armenian army's uniform and equipment and raised the Armenian army's flag all the way from the main road to the capital of Asriya County. Such a grand march immediately shocked the rebels in Asriya County. Some of the rebels in Asriya County sent messengers to intercept them halfway. "You Armenian army, how did you cross the border and come to our territory?" Naturally, the messengers who did not go did not return. The small group of 500 people marched quickly. In 2 days, they had already reached the capital of Asriya County. A large number of carriages were set up outside the city, with flags everywhere. There were not many rebels in the city. When they saw the situation outside the city, they thought that the army outside the city was too strong and did not dare to go out to meet the enemy. They could only use the magic formation in the city to quickly contact their superiors for help and closed the city gates to wait for reinforcements. For the whole night, the drums outside the city did not stop. The defenders in the city did not dare to go out of the city. After dawn, there was still no movement from the Armenian army outside the city. Only the sound of drums could be heard intermittently. The defenders in the city finally became suspicious. They sent hundreds of people out to pretend to attack for a while. In the end, they easily broke into the camp and found that it was empty. There was no trace of the enemy. Only in the camp, there were dozens of farmers and the like who were captured nearby. They were holding drums and beating them intermittently. The defenders were furious. They caught some people and interrogated them. It turned out that these farmers were recruited from nearby areas. The other party gave each of them a reward of 10 gold coins as long as they beat the drums for one night. They were also told that there were archers hiding in the woods behind. If they dared to abandon the drums and run away, they would be shot to death immediately. In the end, there were no archers in the woods behind. At this time, a whole night had passed. The 500 cavalrymen had already gone all the way. The rebels in Asriya were furious. They ordered the defenders to tighten their defenses and sent someone to the north to send a letter to Armenia. They asked Hughes why he ignored the agreement and sent troops to the border to harass them. Hughes naturally refused to admit it. As a result, the two sides had a lot of arguments back and forth. 6 days later, a checkpoint at the northern border of Asriya was raided. This was the most difficult battle that the 4,000 Rodrian cavalrymen had experienced on their way to the north. The 4,000 cavalrymen drove straight in and defeated 2 sentry squads along the way. They also threatened some local farmers and civilians. A large number of frightened soldiers and civilians rushed into the city. More than 100 of the most elite warriors that Reinhardt had personally selected were mixed in with the refugees. 2 hours later, the city was ready. The 4,000 cavalrymen outside the city had killed their way to the city. At this time, Reinhardt led more than 100 elite warriors and suddenly launched an attack. Reinhardt personally led his men to seize the city gate. After a fierce battle, Reinhardt suffered 3 serious injuries and no less than 10 minor injuries. More than half of the 100 elites that he had brought into the city were killed. Finally, the city gate was opened. It only took a moment. The cavalrymen outside took the opportunity to kill their way into the city and seized the city gate in one fell swoop. This battle was the biggest loss for the 4,000 Rhodrian cavalrymen on their way to the north. They suffered a total of more than 400 casualties. There were originally several thousand soldiers defending the city gate. Previously, they had only relied on the high walls to defend. Once the city gate was breached, how could they stop the Rhodrian cavalrymen in a frontal battle? They were defeated in just a moment. After seizing the city gate, the 4,000 Rhodrian cavalrymen rested for an entire day. When the whole of Acilia Prefecture was shaken and a division was mobilized to counterattack, the Rhodrian cavalrymen were already on their way again. They abandoned the empty city and headed north. After crossing the border, they would arrive at the prefecture of Ilton. Ilton had already been occupied by Odin's men. The rebel army in Acilia Prefecture chased them to the border and did not dare to advance any further for fear of causing unnecessary conflict with Odin's men. They could only swallow the bitter fruit. Ilton had already been occupied by Odin's men. However, the military strength within the prefecture was even more lacking. Even Manninger had personally led his men to the Corsica military region. It was said that he was mobilizing his men to organize a battle to take the capital of the Corsica military region. He intended to crush this troublesome opponent in one fell swoop. The 4,000 Rhodrian cavalrymen were much more well-behaved this time. Since they had already obtained sufficient horses and supplies, they might as well go straight into the city. They passed through villages, towns, and cities without attacking. They only took detours. Even if the Odin's men in the city knew about it, they would not be able to catch up. After 4 days of forced marching, day and night, most of the horses in the army were exhausted. The soldiers were also exhausted. By the time the Odin's men were in chaos, the command system of the Odin's army was really chaotic and backward. In the Scarlet Snow Army, Manninger had gone to Corsica, so the internal deployment was lagging behind. By the time the Odin's men reacted, the 4,000 cavalrymen had already gone north, crossed the border, and entered the prefecture of Moor. Along the way, Reinhardt was injured in the battle. Coupled with the bumpy journey, he had lost a lot of weight. The entire army was finally convinced by this seemingly weak young officer. When they finally entered the territory of Moor, Reinhardt ordered the troops to slow down a little. At the same time, he sent someone to Denzel City on horseback to contact him. However, he found Philip right in front of him. This young man's face was already tired and pale. Although he was seriously injured and his body was weak, the light in his eyes was becoming more and more demonic. Mr. Philip, I have one more thing to explain to you. Please don't blame me for taking so long to explain it to you. Looking at Reinhardt's smile, Philip immediately felt a strong sense of uneasiness. He pulled a long face and said, "Judging from your tone, I don't think you're going to say anything good." Reinhardt smiled and gestured for Philip to come closer. He then lowered his voice and laughed. "Only you and I know that the order of appointment is fake. When it is sent to your master, he will naturally know about it himself. What I said before is true. When your master becomes powerful in the future, the upper echelons of the empire can only acknowledge his position. However, there is an important matter." "What is it?" "During this period of time, before your Lord Shea has gained a firm foothold, swallowed up the other various armies, and completely integrated the forces under his command, this secret must not be revealed. Once this order is revealed to be fake, I'm afraid that those who were originally dissatisfied with him will immediately fall into chaos. So what?" Philip frowned, feeling more and more uneasy. "I'm worried that your master Shea will kill the two of us for the sake of stability." Reinhardt's words caused Philip's heart to skip a beat. His face changed on the spot. "What did you say? What's so strange about that?" Reinhardt said calmly. "According to my calculations, no matter how wise your master Shea is, to swallow up the forces of the other tribes, reorganize them, install his own loyal subordinates and win over the hearts of the people, it will take at least half a year to a year. During this period of time, the news must not be leaked. After this period of time, even if it is leaked, it doesn't matter. At that time, everyone will have already followed him and can only follow him to the end. However, this 1-year period is the key. For the sake of the big picture, perhaps his master will be ruthless and find an opportunity to secretly silence the two of us forever. Philip immediately shouted in anger, "Nonsense! Master Shea is definitely not that kind of ruthless person." Reinhardt looked into Philip's eyes for a long time. Then, he suddenly sighed. The young man's expression became a little strange and complicated. He said in a low voice, "I actually hope that he is a cruel and merciless person. If his heart isn't cruel enough, I'm afraid that he won't be able to survive in this chaotic world. If he accidentally follows a soft-hearted boss, that would be worse than death." A 12,000-word outburst. "If everyone doesn't vote, I will vomit blood and die from grief." To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com to read more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 376. GOR Chapter 355. The Fair Merlin, I can't live like this anymore. Shea wiped his face fiercely and tossed the towel to Iranti, who was standing beside him with a fawning expression. This young former farmer, now Shea's attendant, held the basin in one hand and the towel in the other. He then whispered in a fawning voice, "That, sir, do you want to go to the backyard to take a look?" Immediately shuddered and fiercely glared at this guy. "Do you think I, your father, have lived for too long?" Pausing for a moment, Shea frowned and asked, "Where is Popov?" Iranti thought for a moment and whispered, "Sir Dax ran out early in the morning. He said he wanted to familiarize himself with the geography of this place. I heard he went out with a group of mounted scouts to patrol the city." Shea snorted. "He sure runs fast." At that moment, a loud boom came from outside the window. The sound caused the house to shake a few times. Suddenly, the dust on the roof was shaken off. Shea rushed to the window and looked outside. He saw a plume of black smoke rising to the sky from the backyard. As Shea looked at it, his face suddenly fell. Iranti, who was standing behind him, had a calm expression on his face. However, he was thinking to himself, "This is the 8th time in recent days. Sir's foster mother, what kind of magical experiment is she doing?" This matter started from the day Shea returned to the city. That day, Nene angrily ran out of the mayor's mansion. When she reached the door, she was greeted by a scene from her nightmare. At that time, the fearless Miss Pawnee's legs went soft, and she fell to the ground at the door. "Not bad, not bad. Beautiful little girl, you have grown up." Merlin pinched Nene's chin with 2 fingers. With an evil smile on his face, coupled with her eye-catching long white hair and her white robe, she looked exactly like an evil witch. Nene's chin was held by Merlin's 2 fingers. This was a standard teasing action, but Nene did not have the strength to resist. There was only one voice in her mind. "It's her. It's her. It was her. Little girl, why are you looking at me like that?" Merlin's voice was a little hoarse, but the smile in his eyes became more and more strange. "I didn't expect to see you here. Are you also working for that useless adopted son of mine?" "Good, very good." She said "very good" twice, but inside, she was at a loss as to what was so good about it. At this moment, in the courtyard of the town defense mansion, Todoro was staggering toward the door. As soon as he reached the door, he saw Merlin standing there. The poor wizard immediately had goosebumps all over his body. He suddenly screamed, but before he could finish screaming, he had already covered his mouth with force. As a result, the sound coming from his throat was like that of a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Merlin raised his head and saw Todoro. A spark flashed in his eyes, and his smile was a little sinister. "Isn't this my loyal servant, Todoro? I sent you out to do something, but you never came back. It's been so many days, and I didn't see you come back. I just thought that you were accidentally eaten by some magical beast. Now, it seems that you're living a very carefree life here." As he spoke, he let go of Nene, put his hands behind his back, and swaggered into the mansion. Todoro stood in the same place, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. The muscles on his face twitched, and his eyes were full of fear. Finally, when Merlin walked in front of him, the poor wizard had already knelt down with a plop. He shouted at the top of his voice, "Great, sacred, and supreme Lord Merlin, your wisdom is enough to light up the magic light of this world. Please accept the tribute of your humble and loyal servant to you. May the heavens and the gods bless you, and let you stay young forever and live a long life." At the end, his voice was already trembling uncontrollably. Merlin laughed dryly. He lowered his eyelids, and the light in his eyes swept over Todoro. He said indifferently, "Live a long life? Very good. The greatest fortune-telling master in the world, Dickeny, once told me that I could live to 300 years old. You just opened your mouth and reduced my lifespan by 200 years. You're really loyal. Very good, very good." It was the same too, very good, but Todoro was sweating profusely. He stood there, not knowing whether to cry or laugh. He could only raise his head and look at Merlin, his eyes full of pleading. "All right, although you are lazy and stupid, and this time you dared to disobey my orders and stay outside. Originally, as a punishment, I was going to turn you into a frog or an earthworm or something, but seeing that your words are quite interesting, I'll give you a lighter punishment. Let me concoct a potion that will last me for 20 days. Todoro was sweating profusely. He finally let out a long sigh, and hurriedly bowed again and again, with a grateful expression. "Where's that good-for-nothing adopted son of mine?" Merlin's face changed. "Have you done what I asked you to do? If he loses even a strand of hair, I'll cut off one of your legs." Todoro thought to himself, "Thank God for his blessings. Master just came back today and you came. If you came a day earlier and found out that Master was missing, I'm afraid you would have cut me into 8 pieces in a fit of anger." Thinking of this, his face was filled with fear. He hurriedly smiled, nodded and bowed, and led Merlin inside. Although there were some guards in the mansion, they saw that this white-haired sorceress had a strange appearance. Even the fearless Miss Nene was so scared that she fell to the ground and could not stand up. Even Sir Shea's personal attendant, Todoro, had to bow and scrape before her. Thinking that the other party's status was not to be underestimated, how could they dare to stop her? Merlin clasped his hands behind his back and followed Theodore inside. As he walked, he pursed his lips and pointed around. "This house is too short. It needs to be demolished and rebuilt. That courtyard needs to be torn down and expanded by 3 times before it's barely enough. What are these trees here for? Cut them all down and plant some of the man-eating plants I just cultivated." Shea was in the middle of a discussion with Dax when he heard Todoro's sobbing voice outside. "Sir, master, come out quickly, you." Shea ran out with an impatient expression and yelled, "Why aren't you doing your job properly? Why are you yelling again?" Raising his head, he saw Merlin standing behind Todoro with a faint smile on his face. Shea immediately swallowed the latter half of his sentence, and stood there as if he had been petrified, staring blankly at Merlin. "What's wrong? You can't even move your mouth after seeing me?" Merlin rolled his eyes. Shea was stunned for a while before he opened his mouth. "That, Sir Merlin, you... Merlin's face darkened and he sighed softly. His voice was filled with melancholy. "Is it so difficult to call me foster mother? That old man of yours doesn't have a conscience. You little bastard also have no conscience. If I hadn't helped you a few times, you would have died long ago. Hearing this, Shea thought that it was true. If Merlin hadn't helped him in the underground cave, he wouldn't have been able to escape from Demandra's. And a few days ago, if Merlin hadn't sent Todoro to help with the magic cannons, he wouldn't have been able to defeat that elf and flamingo. Thinking of this, he made up his mind. However, he still felt that it was a little strange. His expression was a little strange, but he tried his best to use a respectful tone and said, "Yes, foster mother." He thought that Merlin would be satisfied with this greeting, but who knew that Merlin's expression changed and he said coldly, "Since you know that I'm your foster mother, then what about the things I asked you to do? The last time you left, I gave you a list of things to complete as soon as possible and have someone send it to me in the mountains. Have you forgotten all about it? Do you know how precious my time is? Do you know how much of a loss this world's magic civilization will suffer by delaying my magic research?" Shea smiled bitterly. It's not that I didn't do my best. The moment I returned, Odin's people attacked and occupied my territory. These days we've been fighting to the death with Odin's people. I lost most of my territory and the trade routes were also cut off. The things you want I really can't buy. Merlin's expression turned ugly. Although she was somewhat dissatisfied, she thought that Shea was telling the truth and didn't flare up again. Then, the expert snorted and said, "All right, let's not talk nonsense. I've lived in the mountains for a few months and have long since grown tired of it. Since I'm here, I'll give you a chance to show your filial piety. Have someone prepare some good food, bathwater, a room. These days in the mountains, those Zakus only know how to roast some prey. I've eaten so much that I'm about to throw up." Shea quickly agreed, but Merlin had already added, "There's no need to send someone else to serve me. Although Todoro is useless, he's still respectful. Let him serve me." Todoro had a pitiful look on his face. He looked at Shea with pleading eyes, hoping that Shea would refuse, but at this time, Shea didn't care if he died or not. He agreed at once and hurriedly invited Merlin to rest in the courtyard at the back. Shea calmed himself down a little. Although he had been trembling with fear when facing Merlin, after settling down, he became somewhat happy. With a top contender like Merlin here, he would be a great help. Other things aside, at least, with Merlin here, he wouldn't have to worry about that guy Hastings coming to find trouble with him. With such a great god here, as long as he was in the open, no one would dare to find trouble with him unless the god Emperor Odin arrived or holy Roland Garros came out of Babylon. A few days ago, he had been trembling with fear every day, as if he was treading on thin ice. Now that there was such a great god standing by his side. God bless him, let that guy Manninger bring his men over right now. However, Shea soon found that he was happy too early. Merlin moved into Shea's garrison mansion and immediately occupied the entire backyard. The backyard was originally Shea's residence. The bald man Kevin's widow, Uria, had also been living here. Shea had just returned today and had just arranged for the two girls, Adeline and Daphne, to enter. He hadn't even taken a step into the backyard. As soon as he led Merlin in, he saw Adeline standing at the door, looking at him with a resentful expression. When Adeline saw Shea come in, her eyes were first filled with joy, but then she saw Merlin who had come in together with Shea. Merlin had a head of long white hair and a white robe that fluttered in the wind. She had a technique to maintain her youthful appearance. Judging from her appearance, she appeared to be in her 20s. In addition, her facial features were exquisite and beautiful to begin with. Adeline had already accumulated a great deal of resentment in her heart. Seeing Shea walk in together with such a white-haired beauty, and the way Shea appeared to be extremely submissive towards this beauty, she suddenly felt a surge of jealousy in her heart. Merlin came to the backyard and swept her gaze around. When she saw Adeline, her eyes flickered, but she did not say anything. She only said, "Not bad, this place is fine. You can move the others out. I don't like too many unrelated people. How could Shea dare to say no? He immediately nodded his head. Then, Merlin pointed at Adeline. Who is this long-legged chick? Her appearance is not bad. I think she is quite pleasing to the eye. She can stay and be my maid for the time being. Shea's face instantly fell. Adeline was furious. She walked over and said angrily, What did you say? Who do you think you are? How dare you look down on me? Merlin looked at Adeline and revealed a faint smile. Humph, little girl. Looking at you, I find you somewhat familiar. You have the smell of the Hannigan family on you. Humph, when those little things from the Hannigan family see me, they are all fearful. I remember there was a little thing called Kekulin. Once, during a snowy day, he stood outside my house for 1 day and 1 night. Afterwards, when I went out, he personally held the whip and acted as my coachman. He was afraid that I would refuse, so when I got on his carriage, he even happily helped me drive the carriage. You little thing from the Hannigan family, you're a bit strange, heh? In this world, you are the first person who dares to call me a thing. Those words left Adeline dumbfounded. Poor thing looked at Shea helplessly. Clearly, her mind was in a mess. Shea quickly went forward to pull her back. He whispered, don't talk nonsense. She is my foster mother. What foster mother? Just call me mother. Do you think I will let you suffer a loss? Merlin said proudly. In this world, there are tens of thousands of people who would like to kneel before me and call me Granny. I don't even care. Adeline's face suddenly turned peculiar. She turned to look at Shea and said with a somewhat hoarse voice, You? She is your mother? You have a mother? There was an awkward expression on Shea's face, and he found it difficult to explain. However, seeing how respectful he was, Adeline was quick to believe him. As a result, the next scene caused Shea to collapse. Who knew where this poor thing's courage came from? Or perhaps it was the cold treatment he received from Shea along the way. All the resentment he accumulated from Shea erupted here. The long-legged girl suddenly took 2 steps forward and knelt before Merlin. Both her hands tugged at the corners of Merlin's robes as she shouted, Great Mother! Hearing that shout, Shea nearly blacked out. Hearing that, Merlin beamed with joy. He lowered his head to look at Adeline. There was even a seemingly benevolent smile on his face. He reached out to stroke Adeline's hair and said in a pleasant tone, Little girl, what did you call me? This little bastard is my son, but you are not my daughter, are you? You are a girl of the Hannigan family. You cannot simply call me that. Tears flowed out from Adeline's eyes, and she gripped Merlin's robes tightly. No. Great Mother, you must uphold justice for me. I am. Adeline suddenly clenched her teeth and said loudly, I am this bastard's woman. He abandoned me. I have abandoned everything and given myself to him, but he does not want me anymore. Great Mother, you must uphold justice for me. After saying that, she began sobbing. At first, Merlin only listened with a smile. However, when she heard the words, abandon after seducing, 2 sparks suddenly appeared in the eyes of this terrifying female contender. Shea, who was standing by the side, immediately felt a gust of dense murderous intent and his body almost trembled. Very good. Merlin lovingly stroked Adeline's hair and reached out to pull her up. He smiled and said, All right, don't worry. I will make it for you. In my life, what I hate the most are heartless men who abandon me. After saying that, he held Adeline's hand and pulled her to his side. He turned his head and carefully sized up Shea. His gaze scanned Shea from head to toe, and then from his feet to his head. His gaze made Shea's hair stand on end. Then, he heard Merlin deliberately use a calm and slow tone to say, Very good. Back then, Lao Tzu was also a person who abandoned me. Now, you little bastard, you have learned from your Lao Tzu's style? Huh. When Merlin said that, Shea's heart immediately thumped. He knew that something was wrong. Back then, there were too many entanglements in the past between Merlin and the old man. He did not know much about it, but it seemed that in the end, the old man had betrayed Merlin and played the role of a heartless man. Merlin's heart was filled with resentment. It seemed that the poor thing's tearful complaints had aroused Merlin's hatred of a common enemy. Shea panicked and hurriedly explained, I didn't do anything to her that I abandoned her. I always thought of her as a man, Shut up, did I ask you a question? Merlin snorted, his face cold. However, when he turned his head to face Adeline, his face was full of warmth. Little girl, he said that he didn't do anything to betray you and thought of you as a man. Sigh, this kid is spouting nonsense with his eyes wide open. You're such a beautiful little girl, is he blind? How could he think of you as a man? Adeline's face flushed red and she whispered, He did something to betray me, After saying that, the poor thing's face was so red that it seemed as though blood would seep out from it. The shame on his face was uncontrollable. Finally, he moved closer to Merlin's ear, lowered his voice and whispered a few words. Shea's ears perked up in an attempt to eavesdrop. However, with a glare from Merlin and a slight flick of his sleeve, Shea was unable to hear anything. After Adeline had finished speaking, Merlin's expression became extremely interesting. It was as though he wanted to laugh maniacally. However, he then felt that such an expression was inappropriate and forced himself to restrain himself. He glared fiercely at Shea and said angrily, You little bastard! You did that to her! You still dare to say that you didn't do anything to her? You still have the nerve to say that you thought of her as a man. Could it be that you would do that kind of thing to a man? Shea's head was filled with confusion. What did I do? Merlin gave a heavy harumph and said, If I didn't know about this, it would have been fine. However, since I've encountered it, I will never let you do the same thing as that old thing. She turned to look at Adeline and said softly, All right, how do you want to punish him? Adeline shook her head and said in a low voice, I only ask that he not treat me so coldly. If he can treat me a little better, I will be satisfied. I have abandoned everything to come find him. I have already given myself to him. If he does not want me, I can only. After saying that, the poor thing's mouth twitched and his eyes turned red. Treat you a little better? How is that enough? Not enough, not enough. Far from enough. Merlin was furious. He suddenly moved forward and glared at Shea. You little bastard, if I had known that you were this kind of person, I would not have saved you. I would have let that big snake eat you. Merlin stood there and scratched his head. Then, he suddenly slapped his forehead and said, All right, let's do it this way. I will make the decision on this matter. What decision? Shea immediately felt a strong sense of unease. Merlin harumphed and looked at Shea. Then, he said in a tone as though he had turned into ashes, What else could it be? Marriage. Marriage? Shea nearly fell to the ground. Even Adeline had stopped crying. She stared at this Madam Mother with a dumbfounded expression. Her heart had been filled with grievances and hardship. She had come to the north to meet Shea. After meeting him, she had revealed her identity as a woman. However, this bastard, he had treated her so coldly. She was filled with bitterness and could not stop herself from complaining to Merlin. She had only hoped that Shea would treat her kindly. She did not have any other extravagant requests. But who would have thought that this mother would actually make the decision to get married just like that? Get married? No. Shea had no time to be afraid and quickly shouted out. No, that's not good. Adeline was not resolute. Instead, there was a look of surprise and anticipation in her eyes. No. Merlin sneered. Then, Shea finally experienced Merlin's unreasonableness. For a peerless expert like Merlin, if she was unreasonable, the result would usually be, there was really no reason to reason with her. Either you get married, marry her and take responsibility for her, or I will turn you into a frog and release that big snake. I will remove the seal on its body and let it come find you for revenge. You choose. Merlin said calmly, this old man does things fairly. You choose. I will not force you. Please recommend me. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 377. Geoar Chapter 356 Forced marriage. Given Shea's understanding of this crazy woman, if he dared to shake his head or utter the word, no, considering how she had behaved in the past, she would turn him into a frog or an earthworm. Then, she would release Demendras to seek revenge on him. Facing Merlin, the pitiful snake could only be abused. However, if it were to come to him for a PK, he would most likely be the one being abused. Most importantly, given how crazy this woman was, can you guarantee that she would not do it? The poor country bumpkin's face turned red, and he rubbed his hands anxiously. There was a dull look in his eyes as he said, I only just got back today. I haven't even brushed my teeth yet and you suddenly told me about getting married. I really did not prepare anything. Merlin pursed his lips to the side and stared viciously at Shea. What do you need to prepare for marriage? If she is willing, just go through with the ceremony. Then, as your elder, I will make the decision for you. After the ceremony, I will just throw the two of you into the room. Isn't that enough? Shea's heart turned cold. He was unable to stop the image of Merlin tying him up like a mummy and throwing him into the bridal chamber. I am a high-ranking official of the empire, an important official. At any rate, I am still a county governor and a baron. Marriage is not something to be trifled with. Otherwise, if word gets out, it would not look good on me. Wouldn't it be too shabby? Shea stammered as he desperately tried to find excuses for himself. When Merlin heard this, he nodded his head slightly and muttered to himself, although your words are an excuse, there is some truth to it. That bullshit official position of yours, in my opinion, doesn't mean much. But the key point here is that you are my adopted son. How could I, Merlin's son, hold a wedding so casually? Besides, this little girl has the blood of the Hannigan family flowing through her body. If word gets out that my son is getting married to a girl from the Hannigan family without making any noise, wouldn't we become a laughingstock? Merlin placed his hands behind his back and paced back and forth. Finally, he waved his sleeve and said, so be it. Let's prepare for the wedding and set it for 1 month later. My son is getting married. Humph, those old fellows in this world will have to give me some face. Some of them will have to personally come to congratulate me. If they come, they would be embarrassed to come empty-handed. Additionally, many of them live in remote and secretive places. Sending the news over and waiting for them to arrive will take some time. And in this 1 month's time, we need to properly prepare. Thankfully, you have an official position. But, Shea only felt bitterness in his mouth. He had scratched his ears and cheeks to evade, only to give himself time to rush? Since we need to prepare, then prepare properly. You are my son. You cannot throw away this old man's face and, I remember when King Lantis got married, he built a platform outside the palace. It was 4 meters high and 20 meters wide. You, on the other hand, are sloppy. But it cannot be any worse than King Lantis. Shea's eyes darkened. Cannot be any worse than King Lantis? He was just a small county governor. The difference between him and the head of one of the 3 strongest countries was too great. Seeing Shea's expression, Merlin knew what he was thinking. She sneered in disdain and said, What are you afraid of? You are my son, my son. Even if King Lantis were to stand before you, you have the qualifications to stand on equal footing with him." After saying that, she stroked her hair and said, "As for the platform for the ceremony, it only needs to be 4 meters high and 20 meters wide. As for the flowers, send someone to purchase them. Roses and fresh flowers of various colors. And there are also lilies. This old woman likes lilies the most." Pausing for a moment, Merlin suddenly gave a soft sigh and said, "Also tulip flowers. That old bastard loves them the most. Speaking of which, you are his son. So, you have another identity, Tulip." Merlin smiled faintly. However, her next words nearly caused Shea to collapse. "There is no need for too many of these flowers. 8,000 of each type should be enough." 8,000 of each type? That's all. Tens of thousands of flowers. Even if they were to feed the horses, it would be enough to last them for a month. Shea could not even sigh. He stammered, "That? Madam Adoptive Mother, I have to remind you. Your son is just a small county governor. I do not have that much money." "Money? Since you are a county governor, do you not have money in the storehouse?" Merlin's reply nearly caused Shea to cry. "Storehouse? To hell with the storehouse! How could Moore County have any money? Up until now, the military equipment and the like could still be used in the storehouse. However, the funding for the county was almost entirely dependent on the gold that he had obtained from the Zakuti people. Speaking of which, other officials were all corrupt. However, Lao Tzu, as an official, was using his own private stash to support the country's army. It is not just a matter of money. Shea's face turned red and he cautiously reminded her, "This is not a normal time. This is a time of war. If we are to create a ruckus here, what if the Odin people or the rebel army come here?" Merlin's eyes widened and she said, "Who dares?" This powerful expert was enraged and a monstrous aura surged out from her body. The powerful aura caused Shea to feel suffocated. Adeline, who was beside him, was so frightened that her face turned pale and she found it difficult to breathe. Merlin flicked her sleeve and sneered arrogantly. "The Odin people dare to cause trouble for my son's wedding? Let's see which one of them has a death wish. If they provoke me, I will go to the Odin people and burn down Hannigan's imperial city." As he spoke, Merlin looked at Shea, and his tone sounded as if he was about to turn to ashes. "Don't worry, if there are any blind people who come to make trouble, even if there are thousands of soldiers and horses, this old man will help you block them." "Fine." Shea could only shut his mouth and curse inwardly. "You are a powerful expert. Naturally, you are not afraid of the Odin people. You even dare to challenge the divine King Odin. Who would dare to provoke you?" Shea wanted to say something else, but Merlin glared at him and said, "You are constantly looking for excuses. Are you trying to refuse the marriage? Do you want to be a heartless bastard who abandons her after using her?" After saying that, Merlin's eyes were already emitting sparks. Shea hurriedly shrank back, but in his heart, he was about to vomit blood. At this time, Adeline suddenly said timidly, "That? Dear mother, I have something to say." Merlin looked at Adeline and his expression immediately became amiable. He said softly, "Just say what you want to say. This old lady will help you. Don't be afraid of this little bastard. If he bullies you, I will teach you 2 forbidden magic spells." Shea's face paled. Adeline also had a strange expression on her face. Her eyes were filled with fear and she shrank back slightly. She bit her lips and finally raised her eyes to look at Merlin. She said softly, "You are kind enough to help me. Naturally, I am grateful. However, Shea still has so many important things to do. If you ask him to marry me at this time, I'm afraid he might not be willing. I like him in my heart and only want him to be happy. I don't want to see him in a difficult position or do anything that he doesn't like. Moreover, if I force him to marry me now, I'm afraid he will have a grudge in his heart." Merlin said, "Don't be afraid." I said, He won't dare to bully you. No, 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 Adeline hurriedly said. I'm not afraid of being bullied by him. It's just that I don't want to force him to do something that he doesn't like. Moreover, he has so many important things to do now. It's not good to be distracted. Moreover, Adeline gritted her teeth. In fact, poor thing was naturally very willing to marry Shea. She had already given herself to Shea and had made up her mind to follow this man. However, the problem was that although she was willing, she knew that Shea might not be willing. The relationship between the two of them was still somewhat awkward. If she let the elders force Shea to marry her at this time, even if she succeeded, Shea might not really like her in his heart. Therefore, she could only bite the bullet and find an excuse to refuse against her own intentions. Moreover, since you have seen through my family background, then, my marriage must be approved by my family. Adeline thought for a moment and said, "This matter, it's better to." Merlin looked at the struggling face of this little girl. It was obvious that she loved Shea so much in her eyes, but she still opened her mouth to refuse the marriage. With Merlin's intelligence, how could he not see through this little girl's thoughts? Although it was the first time she met Adeline, she did not really like this little girl. However, because of her own personal experience in the past, she felt sad for the loss of her own kind. She hated Shea even more for being unfaithful. In the end, she was actually venting the resentment that she had accumulated for decades on this young man and woman. She always wanted to play matchmaker with these two, as if she could faintly find some of her own regrets in the past. Merlin interrupted Adeline's words and directly shouted, "Why are you so long-winded? I only need one word from you. Do you like this bastard boy or not?" Adeline blushed and glanced at Shea. However, she found that Shea was also staring at her. She made up her mind and gently nodded. "Good. Then, in your heart, do you want to marry this little bastard?" Merlin asked and then added, "You better think about your answer. If you say no, then I will let him marry someone else in the future. After this time, you won't have this chance anymore." Adeline was helpless and finally nodded again with difficulty. "That's enough. You like him and your heart is willing to marry him. What's there to hesitate about?" Merlin waved his hand. "Where's Todoro? Get your ass over here." Todoro stood at the side and was already stunned. He only felt that this Sir Merlin was rude and unreasonable. It was simply a wonder in the world. When he thought about Sir Shea's rude and shameless manner, it seemed that it was really like an old saying, "If you are not a family, you will not enter a family." The wizard was sighing with emotion when he suddenly heard Merlin calling for him. He hurriedly gathered his thoughts and responded. He walked in front of Merlin and put on a flattering smile. "Great Sir Merlin, enough, there's no need to flatter me." Merlin thought for a moment. "I want to make some things to be used as fireworks for the wedding. For the next few days, you will accompany me in making the preparations." Todoro complained in his heart, but he could only put on a happy expression and agree. Then, Merlin had Todoro write down a list. On the list were more than 10 types of medicinal herbs and various types of saltpeter and other mineral materials. He had Todoro immediately go around the city to purchase them. After doing all that, Merlin waved his hand. "Enough. Go back and rest. This old man will definitely make sure that nothing goes wrong with this wedding." After saying that, Merlin pulled Adeline into the room, leaving Shea standing there, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. This crazy woman asked the poor thing if he likes me and if he is willing to marry me. But, from the beginning to the end, she did not ask me if I like the poor thing or if I am willing to marry the poor thing. Just as he was feeling melancholy, he saw the poor thing follow Merlin into the room. The poor thing quietly turned around and made a deeply apologetic expression. Shea sighed and waved his hand at her, indicating that he was not angry with her. Then, He stared blankly in the courtyard for a moment before stomping his foot, turning around and running out. Dax was resting in the conference room. He was holding a plate of roasted horse meat and eating it in large chunks. When he saw Shea rushing in, he laughed. "What's wrong with you? You look like you are being chased by a dog." Shea sat down in front of Dax and immediately said, "I have encountered a big problem. You are very smart, quickly help me think of an idea." "Oh." Dax smiled and did not pay it any mind. Shea quickly recounted his encounter. "In short, I don't want to get married, but now I am forced to." When Dax heard this, he smiled and said, "You want to marry a long-legged girl? That's great. You should be happy that such a beautiful girl is yours." But then he frowned and said, "That elder you mentioned, are you afraid of her? Why don't you dare refuse? This foster mother of yours, who is she to make you so afraid?" Shea swallowed and said, "She is Merlin." 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, Dax finally took a deep breath. "Which Merlin?" "It's that Merlin," Shea said in a bad mood. The expression on Dax's face immediately changed. He jumped up and pointed at Shea's nose. "That Merlin? You mean that Merlin? That Merlin who blocked a fleet by himself, who challenged the entire Byzantium Magic Academy by himself, who charged into Odin's imperial city and fought against the god emperor, and who escaped unscathed? She is actually your foster mother." Seeing Shea solemnly nod his head, Dax sucked in a breath of cold air. He stared at Shea in shock for a long time before finally sitting down again. He spread out his hands and said, "I don't have any way to teach you, so I'll give you a suggestion. Either you obediently get married and pinch your nose as the groom, or you can pack up and leave this place right now. The further you go, the better. Then, from now on, pray every day that you won't be caught by that expert." You don't have any methods?" "I don't." Dax's answer was very straightforward. He had a funny expression on his face as he said, "Don't you know what kind of person your foster mother is? In today's world, there are only 2 people who can firmly suppress her. One is the god Emperor Odin, and the other is a powerhouse guarding the holy city of Babylon. Unfortunately, those 2 powerhouses have nothing to do with you. Other than them, I'm afraid there is no one else who can suppress Merlin. As for reasoning with her, when have you ever heard of Merlin reasoning with anyone?" Shea was speechless. Todoro took Merlin's list and ran outside. When he reached the door, he saw Miss Nene still sitting on the steps with a dazed look on her face. Clearly, she had not recovered from her shock. Todoro walked over kindly and patted Miss Nene's shoulder gently. He knew about the entanglement between Nene and Merlin, and also knew about Nene's fear and resentment towards Merlin. Of course, fear accounted for more than 90% of it. "Well, Miss Nene, although Sir Merlin is a little unreasonable, fortunately, she is our Lord's relative. Since she is here, there will always be a chance in the future. Find a suitable time, while she is happy, and see if you can ask her to help you break the curse." Nene slowly recovered and looked at Todoro with some lingering fear. Is she inside?" "Yes." Todoro smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, our Lord has a bigger headache than you. Do you know? When Sir Merlin came, he forced our Lord Shea to get married immediately. He wanted him to marry Her Royal Highness Princess Adeline." After saying that, Todoro immediately shut his mouth. Realizing that he had blabbed again, he quickly looked at Nene with some regret. Sure enough, Nene's body shook and her eyes widened as she stared at Todoro. Mary? And Her Royal Highness Princess? That girl is actually Her Royal Highness Princess? He is actually going to marry someone else." Nene's face suddenly turned pale and she got up from the ground. Without saying a word, she staggered out of the door. Theodore, who was behind her, shouted a few times, but she did not seem to hear him. She quickly made her way down the street. Todoro's face was filled with regret. He repeatedly stomped his feet, wishing he could slap himself. As he was feeling regretful, he saw Nene turn around and stride back. She quickly came to stand before Todoro. Nene fiercely gritted her teeth and stared at Todoro. "You help me pass on a message to your lord. Say this subordinate, Nene, congratulates him on his marriage." After saying that, Nene turned around and strode away. "Shea, I had thought that you would be different from the others in this world." For the next few days, the entire garrison mansion was in a state of chaos. Todoro received Merlin's orders and obtained a warrant from Shea, allowing him to mobilize the manpower and resources within the city to organize Sir Shea Thunder's wedding. Shea, on the other hand, pinched his nose and endured it. Every day, he would hide in the front and would rather die than take a step into the backyard. Even though he was willing to be an ostrich, willing to bury his head and endure it, there were others who could no longer endure it. As Shea was lamenting to his servant, Irenti, that he could not continue living like this, the sound of hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside. The door was pushed open and Green rushed in with a furious look on his face. The moment he entered, he slammed a badge onto the table. "Sir Shea, your subordinate, Green, asks for your resignation. I cannot be the city guardian of Denzel City. Please find someone else." Shea opened his mouth and looked at the badge on the table. He smiled wryly and said, "Old mad dog, what kind of mental illness are you throwing at me for? I've gone mental?" Green jumped to his feet and roared at Shea. "I think you're the one who's gone mental. The war situation is so dangerous and you actually want to organize some nonsense wedding. Do you know what kind of situation we are in? If you want to marry a wife, I won't say anything. Just marry her. But why do you have to put on such a senseless show of extravagance? Shea, do not forget, you are still far from being successful. You are still struggling bitterly. Could it be that after becoming a mere county guardian, you have become so complacent? Have you forgotten the dangers around you? You've begun to do such foolish and absurd things?" He spoke faster and faster and his spittle nearly sprayed onto Shea's face. "Look at what you've been doing these past few days. You want to marry Her Highness Princess Adeline, fine. She is so angry that she has been desperately patrolling the city these past few days. She has not returned for 3 days. You want to hold a wedding and let Todoro take your warrant to mobilize 1,000 people in the city and build a dam platform. You also let Todoro take your warrant to go to Ka-Tua to mobilize 300 carts and send people to the surrounding mountains to pick flowers. Absurd. Nonsense. Today, you let Todoro take your warrant to go to the cavalry and say that you want to mobilize 300 cavalry to be the honor guard for the wedding. You also want to train the formation? Has your brain been run over by a wheel? We are still at war. You've spent so much manpower and resources just to hold your own bullshit wedding for your own selfish reasons." Green was clearly enraged. His face was red and his expression was fierce. Shea felt wronged and could only comfort Green. "Okay, my old mad dog, don't be angry. I also have my difficulties." Pausing, Shea sighed. These are all forced by my mother." Green was furious. "Forced by your mother?" Shea felt wronged. "Forced by my mother," Green roared. "Forced by your mother. Forced by your mother. Forced by your mother?" Shea's face was heavy. "Forced by my mother, forced by my mother, really forced by my mother." Beside him, Irene, embarrassed. There are keywords. It was not easy to post them. "Okay, I admit that I have a bad taste." To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 378. Gior Chapter 357. A Country Bumpkin's Tragedy. Shea had to expend a lot of saliva, say a lot of good words and make a series of promises before finally managing to get Green, who was like an angry bull, to leave. After sending off Green, Shea kicked out the people around him. He took the fire fork and madly practiced martial arts for several hours. As a result, under his venting of anger, the flowers, plants and trees in the courtyard suffered a calamity and were randomly chopped by him. After Shea finished practicing, there was not a single complete thing left in the entire courtyard. Shea felt stifled and he summoned some men to prepare some hot water. Hiding inside the house, he took a bath. However, before he could finish his bath, he heard the exaggerated screams coming from outside the courtyard. The screams were miserable and sharp, as though someone was holding a knife to his neck. Shea was shocked. He grabbed a towel and put it on before rushing out. Holding the fire fork in one hand and the towel in the other, he jumped into the courtyard and shouted, "Where did the enemy come from?" He saw Iranti holding a broom in his hand. His head was raised at a 45-degree angle as he stared at the sky. When he saw Shea rushing out, he gulped and pointed up. There was a look on his face as he said, My lord, look! Heavens, there are so many crows." Shea was furious. "What is so strange about crows? Have you never seen crows before?" "No, there are so many. Iranti was on the verge of rolling his eyes. Shea raised his head to look up at the sky. What he saw caused him to suck in a breath of cold air. Up in the sky, a large expanse of dark clouds was rolling in from the distance. The dark clouds were very low and the speed at which they were moving was also very fast. However, upon closer inspection, what kind of dark clouds were they? They were simply a flock of crows. It was hard to tell how many thousands of them there were when they were all gathered together. In the blink of an eye, the densely packed flock of crows had arrived in the sky above Denzel City. They circled back and forth above the city guard mansion. Such a scene was truly frightening. Thousands of black crows flew back and forth in the sky, blocking out the sun. Caw, 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 caw. Shea's face turned pale as well. Finally, he screamed, "What's going on?" His heart skipped a beat, and his hand that was holding the towel loosened. The towel fell to the ground, and he stood naked in front of the door. Stunned, Iranti pointed at Shea and said, My lord, you." Shea, who was standing naked in the wind, was so shocked by the crows that he did not realize that he was selling his body. He hurriedly shouted to Iranti, "Quick! Bring me my bow and arrows. Pass down the order, summon all the archers in the city. Quick!" Iluan stared blankly at Shea. Shea shouted angrily, "What are you waiting for? Go!" As he spoke, he raised his leg to kick Iluan. Only then did Iluan run away in fear. As he ran away, he muttered in his heart, "No wonder those chicks were crying and begging to marry my lord. My lord's assets are really strong." Shea turned around and returned to his room. After putting on some clothes, he ran out and saw Iluan running over with his bow and arrows. Shea's condensed howl bow had been destroyed in Demandra's lair long ago. Thus, he was only using an ordinary military bow to replace it. Shea raised his bow and arrows. As he shot, he strode out of the garrison hall. Just as he reached the entrance, he saw that the archers from the city's army had already been assembled. There were about 300 of them. Shea immediately stood on the steps and gave the order. Just as he was about to order the men to shoot down the crows, he saw Todoro rushing out of the garrison hall, sweating profusely. He waved his hands and shouted, "Don't shoot! You can't shoot!" Todoro rushed out and arrived in front of Shea. He grabbed Shea's arm and said, Master, you can't shoot. These crows were summoned by Sir Merlin." Shea stared at Todoro. Then, he grabbed him by the neck and said angrily, "What did you say?" "Yes, it was Sir Merlin who summoned them. It has nothing to do with me." Todoro's face turned red. At this moment, Shea heard Merlin's cold voice coming from inside. He turned his head and saw Merlin slowly walking out from inside in a fluttering white robe. As she walked, she opened her arms, and balls of light flew out from her sleeve. Shea, have your men retreat. Don't hurt my messenger, Merlin said coldly. Messenger? Shea's eyes widened. Merlin had already taken out a gem from her sleeve. She pinched it lightly in her hand, and it turned into a pile of powder. Then, she casually scattered the powder on the ground. The crows that filled the sky immediately formed a formation. They circled down and landed in front of her. Merlin's hands quickly made various strange gestures. She twisted her arms and the crows flew back and forth in the sky as if they were under her command. This process took a full quarter of an hour. Then, Merlin floated away and coldly said, "Whoever dares to hurt my messenger, I'll turn them into crows." Shea's forehead was instantly covered in cold sweat. He quickly ordered all the archers outside to retreat. He also sent people to spread the order everywhere in the city, forbidding the people in the city to shoot the crows without permission. Then, he turned around and chased into the courtyard. Merlin was standing at the door of the backyard. She seemed to have known that Shea would chase after her. When she saw Shea running over, she didn't wait for him to ask and calmly said, "You don't need to make a fuss. These are the ones I summoned to deliver my message." Those old friends of mine are scattered all over the world, and some of them even live in extremely secluded and remote places. If I were to send someone to inform them of your marriage, not to mention whether they would be able to find you, even if they were to find you, it would still take 2 to 3 years. My sky messengers only need 10 or so days to notify those old friends of mine. After saying that, she frowned. I still have a lot of things to do. If there's nothing important, don't disturb me. She closed the door to the backyard and left Shea outside. On this pitiful day, the soldiers and civilians of Denzel City had their horizons broadened. The sky was filled with crows that hovered in the sky for more than an hour. Unfortunately, the county governor, Lord Sheao, had given the order that no one was allowed to casually shoot them. As a result, the thousands of crows that were hovering in the sky above Denzel City did not cause much damage. Instead, they left behind countless souvenirs for the people of Denzel City. By evening, the crows had dispersed. The ground of the streets of Denzel City, and the roofs of the large and small buildings within the city were littered with piles of crow dung. There were also countless black feathers that had fallen off in Shea's eyes. Merlin's magic was not just miraculous, it was abnormal. But he didn't expect that there would be something even more frightening. That night, as Shea was sleeping, he suddenly heard a rustling sound coming from outside. Being a vigilant person, he quickly got up and rushed out of the door. What he saw caused his whole body to turn cold. On the ground of the courtyard was a dense mass of something black. A closer look revealed that it was a group of rats. Who knows where so many rats had come from? What he saw was that the rats seemed to have gained sentience. They were all spread out in the courtyard and sat neatly on the ground. Even when Shea rushed out, the rats did not panic in the slightest. Instead, they simply looked at the door to the backyard. Merlin stood before the door to the backyard. His white robes made him look like a ghost. His mouth made a strange gee-gee sound, which resembled the sound of a rat. After a moment, Merlin shut his mouth and the rats that filled the ground scattered away. In just a moment they had disappeared without a trace. All that was left was the courtyard filled with rat dung and the like. Merlin glanced at Shea, whose legs were somewhat weak, and said coolly, "During the day, I nearly forgot that some of my dwarven friends live in underground caves. Those aerial messengers are unable to contact them. I can only trouble these underground messengers." After saying that, Merlin turned around and walked into the backyard, leaving Chen Xiaolian to stare blankly at the rat dung on the ground. The next morning, Shea, whose eyes were red, was directing the men in the garrison mansion to clean up the dirt on the ground. Suddenly, he saw Green rushing in furiously. He threw a fit at Shea, saying that there were crows everywhere in the city yesterday, and that it was a mess. Shea held his head and listened for a long time. After much difficulty, he managed to coax Green away. The country bumpkin's heart grew increasingly stifled. Finally, he slammed the table. Son of a bitch! Lao Tzu doesn't care anymore. I can't live in this city anymore. If Merlin wants to cause trouble, let her do as she pleases. Let's see if she dares to burn down my Denzel city. Lao Tzu, Lao Tzu. He shouted out loudly, Island. Island scrambled inside. Shea glanced at him and said, Go, tidy up the bedding in my room. Island was stunned. Sir, could it be you want to run away from the marriage? Run away, my ass. Shea thought to himself. Who could run away from Merlin? He sighed and said, I will move to the barracks. Lao Tzu will move to the barracks. On the same day, Shea took his bedding and moved into the barrack. The original barracks in Denzel City had long since been filled up. Thus, a temporary encampment was built outside the city. Shea left Denzel City, bringing only Island and a few of his guards with him. Then, he moved into his own garrison emblem group. Most of the soldiers there were new recruits. They had recruited a group of civilians and farmer soldiers. Using the veterans from the previous garrison army as the foundation, they formed 2 new infantry emblem groups. The barracks were built on a temporary basis. Although the conditions there were somewhat harsh, Shea ran into the barracks and watched the soldiers sweating profusely as they trained. Their shouts and slogans made him feel carefree. Although the new recruits here were organized into 2 emblem groups, they had only been here for a short period of time. Thus, they had yet to recruit enough qualified soldiers. At the very most, they only had less than 2,000 soldiers. Originally, Shea liked mounted soldiers the most. However, after hearing that Nene would be staying in the mounted soldiers' barracks every day, he did not have the courage to face Nene. Thus, he could only come to the infantry barrack. Thinking about it carefully, Shea felt helpless in his heart. He didn't know where this feeling of debt to Nei came from. Speaking of which, he had never made any promises to her. However, whenever he thought of this woman, he would feel guilty. He was the dignified prefectural governor and the most powerful person in Moore County. Yet, he had moved into the barracks and lived with the soldiers. Every day they would wake up together, train together, eat the coarse food together, and sweat together on the field with the soldiers. His actions had won the hearts of the soldiers. After staying in the barracks for a period of time, the standard of training in the new recruits' barracks had improved significantly. Every day, he mingled with the low-level soldiers and officers. He was full of vulgarities and jokes. Everyone felt that this prefectural governor was different from the rest. He was willing to set an example and endure hardships with the soldiers without putting on airs. Even during the most arduous training, Shea would carry his weapons and run with the soldiers every day. He would not run half a step less than anyone else. With him setting an example, the standard of training had improved by several levels. This made Sharba, who was in charge of training the new recruits, sigh in his heart. I heard that our Lord Shea hid in the barracks to escape marriage. Alas, if Lord Shea often ran away from marriage like this 3 to 5 times a year and lived in the barracks every time, our army would have been trained to become elite. God bless, let Lord Shea find a few more wives. Shea lived a carefree life in the barracks for 7 to 8 days. He felt that he had escaped from the troublesome matters in the city and was in a good mood. However, he did not expect that the disaster would still come. On this day, he was betting with several officers to watch the soldiers wrestle when he saw a young man dressed as an officer running over quickly. When he got closer, he saw that it was the young man from Zakur, Atu. Since Atu followed Shea, he had served in his army and was assigned to Shea's personal battalion. He had performed well in the battle to conquer Metter City and had been promoted to a team officer. Seeing Atu running over, Shea did not care. Instead, he waved at him. Atu, come here. You're good at wrestling. Come and practice with these guys. You'll lose face with Lao Tzu, haha. Atu ran over with a distressed face and hurriedly pulled Shea. Sir, please go back to the city. Something bad has happened. Shea did not care. He just curled his lips and said, What's wrong? Did my mother make some crows or rats again? Atu smiled bitterly. There are no crows or rats, but I heard from Lady Merlin that you have a quarter of an hour to appear in front of her. Otherwise, she will turn you into a frog and throw you to Demandras. Shea stared. What? Atu looked left and right. He leaned close to Shea's ear and said something quickly. When Shea heard it, he was scared out of his wits. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. He suddenly shouted and flew out of the crowd. He snatched a horse and jumped on it. Then, he rushed towards the city. Whipping the horse, Shea rushed into the city as if his buttocks were on fire. He rushed towards the backyard. At the entrance of the backyard, he saw a few native warriors dressed in Zakur hunting clothes. The leader was someone he knew. He was the warrior called Garin, who had adventured with him in Demandras's cave. Garin did not speak Byzantium. He only smiled at Shea in a friendly manner and nodded. However, the smile on his face was somewhat strange. Shea did not have time to greet Garin. He rushed into the backyard. As soon as he ran in, he saw a figure standing there, staring at him resentfully. She had long legs and a slim waist. She was tall and slender. It was poor thing Adeline. In the yard, a scene that scared Shea out of his wits was happening. Merlin stood at the door. Beside him was a young girl with an exquisite and curvaceous figure. She was dressed in the attire of the Jakku Earth tribe. She wore a small leather skirt, which accentuated her energetic figure. Her long hair was plaited into a tight braid, as per the custom of the Jakku tribe. She looked rather adorable. The side of her face facing Shea had a gentle and charming arc. It was the daughter of the great tribal chief of the Zakur tribe, the girl named Sulin. Isn't this what made Shea terrified? What made Shea terrified was that this little girl Su Ling was half kneeling there, hugging Merlin's sleeve, crying and complaining about something with snot and tears. This scene, no matter how he looked at it, why did it look familiar? He remembered that a few days ago, wasn't this pitiful girl hugging Merlin's sleeve and crying like this? In the end, he got a promise of a wedding in exchange for calling her mother. And now, this little girl Sulin. Shea hurriedly took a few steps forward. Sure enough, he heard Su Ling's sobbing voice. She sobbed as she wiped away her tears. It's like this. Mother, you have to make a decision for me. I only have him in my heart. The night before he left, I already. If he doesn't want me, I can only give up on living. Woo 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 woo. When Shea heard this, his vision darkened. He saw Merlin turn his head and stare coldly at him. Bastard! Just how many girls have you tossed aside? Before Shea could say anything, Merlin's face was full of anger. He shouted, Since you've done it, you have to take responsibility. As a man, how can you be so reckless? You've attracted so many women and made these girls heartbroken for you. Where is your conscience? As long as I'm here, I won't allow you to do such heartless things. As he spoke, Merlin gently helped Sulin up and said softly, Good girl, don't cry. I'll help you with your suffering. Anyway, we're already preparing for the wedding. 1 is a marriage, 2 is still a marriage. Why don't you just hold the wedding together? When Shea heard this, he almost spat out a mouthful of blood that was stuck in his chest. How could he live like this? If any girl hugs your sleeve, calls you mother, and wipes a few tears, you'll push it all to Lao Tzu? F***ck. If it doesn't work, Lao Tzu can kneel in front of you, hug your sleeve, call you mother, and wipe a few tears. Is that okay? Is that okay? Is that okay? Shea's face was full of grief and indignation. I need recommendation votes. Recommendation votes are really important to this book. Everyone, help me. Don't run away after reading the book. Vote for me, to be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.